Chapter 1159. As the battle grew more intense, Lin Yu's brows were furrowed, but it wasn't because he was facing an invincible enemy. His heart was filled with worry. There was still an Ancestor Realm expert who hadn't shown up yet. If he showed up now, 10 Square World wouldn't have a chance to resist. The situation would be one-sided. The turbid Immortal's Sacred Ground's old holy master who didn't stay in the Heaven Burial Ground 1,000,000 years ago was definitely here, but he hadn't shown up yet. This was a huge rock in the hearts of Lin Yu and the people of 10 Square World. The turbid Immortal Sacred Ground's people had been lying low since the altar. They didn't seem to have participated in everything. That was why Lin Yu felt uneasy. At this moment, laughter came from the back of the abyss. A snow-white, ape-like creature was laughing. Every step it took left a trail of afterimages behind it. The abyss trembled. Behind him, there were a dozen or so other similar creatures. One of them exuded a terrifying aura. The turbid Immortal Sacred Ground's people had also arrived. They looked at the people of 10 Square World with bloodthirsty and cruel smiles. The old holy master of the turbid Immortal Sacred Ground appeared. As he appeared, the sky above the abyss was shrouded in fallen immortal light. He didn't stay in the Heaven Burial Ground for 1,000,000 years, but his cultivation base didn't stagnate. He was even stronger than the old holy masters of the Nether Sacred Ground and Ancient Pot Sacred Ground. This was a losing battle. The 10 Square World's holy master didn't expect the 3 sacred grounds to give birth to 3 Ancestor Realm experts in 1,000,000 years. This was beyond their expectations. Lin Yu was bleeding from the corner of his mouth because of the attack from the Nether Sacred Ground. His aura was also weakened. The gap between their cultivation base was too big. Lin Yu had already done his best to fight him to this extent. Now that the old holy master of the turbid Immortal Sacred Ground was here, 10 Square World was in danger. At this moment, Lin Yu seemed to have made a huge decision. "Senior, you take them away first. I will bring up the rear." Lin Yu's face was expressionless. The mysterious factor was related to by Xiaoli's escape plan. He could not give it up so easily. Ancestor Lu looked at Lin Yu and gave him a deep look. He already understood Lin Yu's intention and nodded. "Be careful." At this moment, Ancestor Lu repelled the old holy master of the Nether Holy Land with a sword strike and broke away from his entanglement. The old leader of the turbid Immortal Sacred Land seemed to have heard a joke. "How can a puny overgod be bold enough to stop us?" "You can give it a try," Lin Yu replied indifferently in the face of ridicule and contempt. At this moment, he took a step forward, and the aura of his body gradually became incomparably overflowing. Tens of thousands of rays of white light shot out from his body. An endless storm of swords began to engulf the entire region. Even the old sacred masters of the Ancestor Realm were slightly startled at this moment. They felt a huge pressure in this storm of swords. The unifying chi of heaven and earth was one of the strongest attacks of the 8 divisions of the Great Void. Ever since Lin Yu broke through to the Divine King Realm, he had not used it for a long time. This was because there was no one in the 12 universes who could force him to use this attack. To kill 1,000 enemies, he would lose 800 of his own men. It was only because Lin Yu possessed the power of the Divine King's Order that he could use it so many times. "I understand now. This kid wants to die with me." The old sacred master of the Ancient Pot Holy Land looked at Lin Yu's killer move and seemed to have understood something. However, his eyes were still filled with endless contempt. "You will never know the difference between the Divine King Realm and the Ancestor Realm. Do you think that you can make up for it by putting your life on the line? Today, you will know what is heaven and earth." At this moment, the old sacred master of the Ancient Pot Holy Land took action and blocked the path of Ancestor Lu and the others. However, when he took action, he was stopped by Lin Yu. The white light instantly engulfed the old sacred master of the Ancient Pot Holy Land. A terrifying killing intent attacked him. He was already invincible among the 10 great holy lands. However, at this moment, his body was cracking. It was as if he was going to be cut into the tiniest particles by the sword storm. "He wants to drag me into the abyss." At this moment, the old sacred master of the Ancient Pot Holy Land was in disbelief. In order to injure me, he is willing to give up his life. At this moment, the old sacred master of the ancient pot holy land shouted in the endless sword storm. He felt that although Lin Yu's attack could not take his life, it could definitely severely injure him. At this moment, his origin was already damaged. This would affect his fight for the mysterious factor. This was almost fatal. However, Lin Yu's attack was not over yet. At this moment, the unifying chi of heaven and earth engulfed the two old sacred masters of the netherworld and the turbid immortal holy land. Lin Yu had already made up his mind to severely injure the three of them so that they would not be able to display their peak condition in the upcoming fight. He wants to destroy us indiscriminately. What a decisive lad. When the old sacred master of the turbid immortal holy land saw the situation of the old sacred master of the ancient pot holy land, his expression changed subconsciously. At this moment, he was actually retreating. The power of the unifying chi of heaven and earth had been greatly reduced after severely injuring the old sacred master of the ancient pot holy land. However, if he wanted to fight it head-on, he would still need to put in a lot of effort. The old sacred master of the turbid immortal holy land thought deeply. He did not want to waste too much energy before this and affect the overall situation. This was also one of the reasons why he was late. The old sacred master of the netherworld snorted coldly and took a step forward. At this moment, Lin Yu's physical body was on the verge of destruction. However, the corners of his mouth still curled up. He was waiting for the remaining two old sacred masters to take the bait. At this moment, although only the old sacred master of the netherworld stepped forward, it was already enough for Lin Yu. At this moment, the power of the deity king's order had already started to emanate from his body. After comprehending all of the 8 great void divisions, the power of the unifying chi of heaven and earth was incomparable to before. At this moment, after severely injuring the old sacred master of the ancient pot, it still possessed an extremely strong destructive power. When the old sacred master of the netherworld stepped forward, the black aura in his hand surged to the sky. He wanted to absorb the endless storm of swords into his hand and crush it. Puff! Unexpectedly, the moment the storm of swords was absorbed, an aura even more terrifying than before permeated the air. The old sacred master of the netherworld was caught off guard. His entire arm exploded. The aura of extermination directly invaded his body, causing his arm to be unable to recover for a long time. Blood immediately flowed from the corner of the old sacred master of the netherworld's mouth. At this moment, Ancestor Lu had already led the people of the 10-direction world to the chain bridge. Bai Yu's tears kept welling up in her eyes. It was undoubtedly a fantasy for an overgod to forcefully stop 3 progenitor realm experts. However, it really happened now. However, Lin Yu would also die because of this. Everyone knew that the divine ability Lin Yu used was definitely at the level of a forbidden technique, and the price was his own life. In the end, the storm of swords swept toward the old sacred master of the turbid immortal holy land. However, its effect was almost negligible. In addition, the old sacred master of the turbid immortal holy land was already on guard against Lin Yu's attack. It was difficult for the storm to have any substantial effect. However, Lin Yu could be considered to have achieved his goal by reaching this step. He turned into a feather of light, and his figure slowly disappeared, until the world returned to silence. Lin Yu's aura disappeared between heaven and earth. No! Under Ancestor Lu's lead, Bai Yu and the others had already reached the other side of the abyss. They just happened to see the scene of Lin Yu disappearing. Bai Yu cried bitterly and knelt at the edge of the abyss. The people of the 10-direction world had heavy hearts. Only Ancestor Lu frowned slightly, as if he had seen through something. However, he still had doubts in his heart. Chapter 1160. Ant, how dare you injure us like this before you die? The old holy lord of the ancient pot sacred grounds' eyes were cold. His entire body was covered in wounds. Destructive power interweaved on them. Even his source was damaged, causing his cultivation to show signs of instability. The old holy lord of the netherworld remained silent. Holding up his broken body, he saw that his right arm was empty, and there was still blood flowing out. Both of them were severely injured, which might affect the fight for the mysterious factor later. Fellow Taoist of the turbid immortal sacred ground, don't you think you've gone overboard? The old holy lord of the ancient pot's sacred ground looked at the old holy lord of the turbid immortal with a questioning gaze. They had already contacted the turbid immortal sacred ground before coming here. However, the turbid immortal sacred ground had only arrived when the battle began. Moreover, the turbid immortal sacred ground seemed to have deliberately held back during the battle, which inevitably made the old holy lord of the ancient pot's sacred ground and the netherworld holy lord unhappy. I've already seen through the kid's peculiarity, but I didn't have time to warn you. I didn't expect a puny overgod cultivator to possess such power. The old holy lord of the turbid immortal explained. His tone was sincere and apologetic. The old holy lord of the ancient pot's sacred ground did not buy it. In the end, he only reminded them indifferently, "You should know that we're on the same boat under the ancestors' orders. If the turbid immortal sacred ground has any ulterior motives, we'll only report it to the ancestor when we leave." The old holy lord of the ancient pot sacred ground directly mentioned the 10 monster kings. It turned out that the turbid immortal, ancient pot, and a netherworld holy lord were targeting the 10-direction world on the orders of the 3 monster kings. They had already sensed that something seemed to have happened to by Shaoli's seal, which was why they ordered the sacred ground forces to target the 10-direction world together 1,000,000 years ago. They want to know something. Let's go deeper and obtain the mysterious factor first, the old holy lord of the netherworld holy lord said. Now that the other sacred ground forces knew about their alliance, they might become the target of public criticism once they entered the 10-direction world. After all, the alliance of the 3 sacred ground forces gave off too much pressure. The other sacred ground forces had formed a grudge against each other because of the mysterious factor when the 10 sacred ground forces were first born. However, in order to obtain the mysterious factor, they would abandon everything else and increase their chances of obtaining it as much as possible. Right now, the biggest threat was undoubtedly them. However, they already had a way to deal with this. If the other forces were to join forces for a short period of time, they would not be as united as an iron bucket. They could use some methods to defeat them one by one. As they spoke, the 3 of them and the people from the turbid immortal Holy Land headed towards the depths. At this moment, Guhu and Old St. Lord Netherworld were already severely injured. It was very likely that they would not be able to recover in a short period of time. The old sacred master of the turbid immortal sacred land was deliberately increasing his speed. He wanted to reach the deepest part before the 2 of them recovered their cultivation. That way, there was a high chance that the mysterious factor would belong to the turbid immortal sacred land. Because of this, it was best for the current turbid immortal holy land to preserve its strength. At this moment, Lin Yu reappeared in the world under the effect of the king of God's order's time-reversing power. However, he had already arrived at the bottom of the abyss. Within the endless black fog, not a single ray of light could be seen. Lin Yu could only rely on his divine will to find a simple path forward. When he was above the abyss, after using the power of the God King's badge, he sensed that there was something in the abyss that was resonating with the God King's badge. There was still some time before the opening of the final destination. Lin Yu took advantage of this to investigate. As Lin Yu moved forward, there were piles of bones under his feet. Some had already turned into powder, while some were still emitting a sparkling light. There was no doubt that these bones were extremely powerful when they were alive. In fact, Lin Yu even saw 1 or 2 corpses. Their bodies were still there, but they were already rotten and emitted an unimaginable stench. These were definitely the corpses of Ancestor Realm experts. However, there was something strange about the aura at the bottom of the abyss. Even the bodies of immortal and indestructible Ancestor stage experts were unable to withstand the corrosion and began to rot. Lin Yu could not help but become cautious. He did not know how far he had walked. This place was already very far from the location of the cable bridge above. However, the number of corpses here did not decrease. Instead, There were more and more of them. They piled up into mountains, and some still maintained their divine forms. Lin Yu realized that the corpses here were definitely not left behind from the battle between the 10 great Holy Lands forces. Instead, an unimaginable battle had once happened here. To be able to involve so many divine kings and ancestor realm cultivators, Lin Yu already found it hard to imagine which era this shocking battle had happened in. Lin Yu recalled the few people he had encountered in a certain era in the stone wall when he was in the 10-directional world. They said that before their era, there had once been a war that destroyed the sky and decimated the earth, involving a wide range of people. If he connected this place and thought of the 10 great demon kings, these figures were all sealed. This could not help but make one's hair stand on end. However, Lin Yu was just guessing and did not stop for long again, because the Divine King token's reaction was still ahead. As the black fog slowly receded, a pure land seemed to appear in front. There were ancient peach trees growing, their roots intertwined and intertwined. Pink petals were floating down. Like a fairyland, there was a rich origin substance inside, accompanied by the fragrance of peach blossoms. Just by staying in this place, one would feel comfortable all over and forget to leave. And at this time, Lin Yu was not in the mood to enjoy the scenery, because in the center of the peach forest in front, there was a huge and boundless corpse. This corpse was very different from the corpses outside, which were rotten or turned into white bones. The corpse was very well preserved, as if there was still residual warmth on it, as if it had just died not long ago. The corpse was very huge, as if an ancient divine mountain was lying here. Even if one of them had passed away, the remnant aura on it was still terrifying, with a terrifying pressure. Lin Yu came to the corpse's head and saw that the corpse's appearance was not much different from that of a human. It was just that there were 7 divine patterns on the corpse's forehead, which seemed to contain boundless power. Through the divine patterns, one could see an indomitable figure. Just a punch of the physical body could shatter the universe. A primitive aura was revealed. At this time, Lin Yu's expression changed, because he sensed the aura of life in this ancient corpse. However, this aura of life seemed to be very young, as if it was just born. And he also seemed to have sensed Lin Yu's aura. At this time, he had already noticed Lin Yu. However, Lin Yu did not sense any malice from it. Lin Yu sensed it again, and then decided to step into the ancient corpse's body. He entered through its slightly open mouth. Even the slightly open lips of this ancient stone were like a huge gate that connected to the heavens. It was as if it was a huge door that connected to another world. Lin Yu walked in, and all he could see were black spots. Lin Yu also knew that the real reason for Gu Shi's death was because of the destructive black spots in his body. As Lin Yu spent a lot of time, he seemed to have reached the abdomen of Gu Shi. The field of vision here was even wider than before, as if he had reached a boundless world. At this time, the owner of the aura of life in front of him appeared. He saw a topless child slowly approaching Lin Yu. Chapter 1161. His eyes were as clear as a flawless lake. At this moment, he was looking at Lin Yu in confusion. "Who are you?" The young child was babbling, and his speech was a little unclear. However, Lin Yu could vaguely make out the meaning from his spirit sense. The words that the young child spoke were an ancient language of a certain era. It seemed to carry the origin of the world. Every word that he said would be accompanied by a strange phenomenon. This made Lin Yu a little surprised. However, he quickly recovered. "I'm from the outside world," Lin Yu replied calmly. He could not see through the young child's cultivation. Moreover, he was in the body of the ancient corpse. It was indescribably terrifying. Therefore, Lin Yu did not deliberately hide it. "Oh, where's the outside world?" It seemed that the young child was born here and had never left. "It's very magnificent. There are magnificent rivers and mountains and peerless human traces." Lin Yu continued. This made the young child's eyes bloom with splendor. Lin Yu only said a few words, but it already made him yearn for it. His black gemstone eyes were constantly shining with stars. Lin Yu looked at the young child and did not know whether to laugh or cry. The young child was chubby. At this moment, He had already lowered his guard against Lin Yu. At this moment, his fat trembled and approached Lin Yu. "Can you take me out?" The young child's eyes were filled with pleading and hope. "Of course, it's not a problem to take you out." Lin Yu nodded with a faint smile, although his words just now were deliberately touching the young child. Looking at the young child's appearance was really lovable. Moreover, he was born in the body of the ancient corpse. It could be said that he had a huge connection with this powerful ancient corpse. The realm of this ancient corpse was no longer something that Lin Yu could see through. Moreover, this chubby young child's realm seemed to be fluctuating. At his peak, he was almost at the ancestor realm. This was definitely a top combat power. In the young child, there was obviously a clear and flawless heart. He was simply born for cultivation, and his future was limitless. If Lin Yu could bring him out, he would definitely be an extremely powerful fighter. However, there seems to be a voice here that keeps reminding me that it wants me to take something out. The toddler hesitated and mumbled, "I haven't been able to sleep well recently. Can you come with me and take a look?" Lin Yu looked at the young boy and immediately agreed. Of course, he had been on guard the entire time. After all, the environment here was strange, and the appearance of the child, although he looked harmless to humans and animals. However, Lin Yu was a vigilant person. He had used the aura of the God King's medallion to protect his body. He was prepared to use his trump cards at any moment. The chubby toddler leading the way suddenly turned his head when Lin Yu used the aura of the God King's seal to protect his body. The confusion in his eyes deepened. "The aura on your body now seems somewhat familiar. It's just that I can't recall it." Lin Yu looked at the child in surprise. He naturally knew that the familiar aura that the child was talking about originated from the God King's medallion in his body. The God King's medallion was extremely mysterious. This was the first time in the history of Lin Yu's medallion that someone had sensed it. Even though the chubby toddler did not know what it was and could only vaguely sense it, it still caused Lin Yu to have doubts in his heart. At the very least, he now knew that the origin of the God King's medallion might be even greater than he had imagined. "Is that so? You can sense the thing in my body?" Lin Yu asked. "I can. However, the thing in your body seems to have a layer of mist on it. It's making my eyes a little blurry." The toddler rubbed his eyes with his chubby little palms. "It won't hurt you, right?" Lin Yu continued asking. "Of course not. Other than my eyes feeling a little sore, I'm completely fine." The toddler replied seriously. "Then let's continue forward. Let me see what it is that's calling out to you," Lin Yu said. At this moment, he was also filled with curiosity. The reason for that was because after he had triggered the aura of the God King's medallion, his heart seemed to have received some sort of mysterious call that was guiding him forward. The direction that they were heading in was exactly the same as the location that the toddler had mentioned. Lin Yu couldn't help but feel even more curious. He wondered what it was that could cause the God King's medallion to react so strangely. As the two of them continued to force their way forward, Lin Yu could roughly tell that they were heading toward the ancient corpse's head. The direction that they were heading toward seemed to have already reached the neck. Lin Yu was very familiar with the environment here. He had passed through here and reached the depths of the ancient corpse. His snow-white teeth were like snowy mountains that were laid out horizontally. They gave off a feeling of warmth and coldness. The aura of the outside world entered through his slightly opened lips. The chubby toddler had been here not long ago. However, because he was afraid of the aura of the outside world, he did not dare to go out even though he was curious. Now that Lin Yu was by his side, he had undoubtedly become a lot bolder. At this moment, the toddler came to the position of the ancient corpse's lips. "Is it the outside world?" The toddler pointed at the peach blossom forest that came into view and asked thoughtfully. "The tip of the iceberg," Lin Yu replied calmly. Indeed, although the peach blossom forest was a magnificent scene like a fairyland, it was not that there were no places that were more beautiful than the outside world. "Really?" The toddler covered his mouth in disbelief. "I thought that the outside world was everything. I didn't expect that there would be. It's a pity that I haven't even gone out of the outside world." He looked at the calm Lin Yu and seemed to be affected by his state of mind. At this moment, he took a deep breath and walked toward the outside world. Bang! A crisp sound of impact was heard. The toddler grimaced in pain. Unknowingly, a huge bump had appeared on his forehead. He was in so much pain that he jumped up and down. His eyes were misty, and the tears that he was holding back seemed to be about to fall at any time. The ancient corpse seemed to have set up a barrier specifically for the toddler. It could not be seen or touched. As long as the toddler wanted to step out of the ancient corpse, it would automatically appear and block him. Thus, when Lin Yu tried it, he was able to freely enter and exit. "Why can't I go out?" The toddler cried loudly and rolled around on the ground. Lin Yu analyzed the situation and comforted him. "You should only be able to leave after you obtain the things in front of you." "Really?" The toddler stopped crying and his eyes were filled with tears. "There shouldn't be a mistake. Even if it doesn't work, you should cultivate properly. With your strength, you should be able to break through the barrier here," Lin Yu said. The toddler felt that this made sense and nodded repeatedly. "But what is cultivation?" He immediately thought of something and asked in confusion. At this time, Lin Yu realized that the toddler didn't even know what cultivation was. But now his cultivation was so high. Could it be that his innate cultivation was like this? If this were to be known by those in the outside world who had cultivated their entire lives, they would likely spit out a mouthful of blood and have their Tao heart shattered. The end of their lives was just the starting point of a little brat. However, Lin Yu did not dwell on this issue. He was full of confidence. This was a kind of invincible belief. He could definitely become powerful and look down on the heavens and earth, standing at the top of the 12 universes. Chapter 1162. At this moment, the call from the front was getting stronger. The chubby toddler's body was already glowing with a dim light. Mysterious divine runes were gradually intertwined on his body. They were filled with power and immeasurable power. Even Lin Yu had no choice but to retreat to a spot 100 feet away from the toddler. Lin Yu silently looked at the toddler, who was out of control. At this moment, the toddler's body was floating towards Gu Shi's head. The mysterious pull was getting more and more intense. In the end, Lin Yu's body seemed to be controlled as well. It was difficult to break free from the shackles. "Open!" Lin Yu naturally wouldn't let himself be trampled on. At this moment, the ruler of God's badge in his body was emitting a mysterious aura. Thus, he was able to isolate this attractive force. He looked at the toddler who was moving forward. His eyes were filled with calmness as he followed behind silently. A few hours passed. The scene inside the ancient corpse was very different. There was a dim light everywhere. However, there was a rotten smell mixed with it. The rotten smell started to recede with the arrival of the toddler. In the end, there was only a dim light. For a cultivator like Lin Yu, this scene couldn't be more familiar. I guess this must be the place where Gu Shi's divine consciousness is. Lin Yu looked around and said slowly. However, the abundance of divine consciousness here was beyond imagination. Moreover, this place had been eroded by some kind of power. However, it was still so vast. It was hard to imagine how strong Gu Shi's divine consciousness was when he was alive. It was boundless, like an otherworldly universe. As the child entered, there was not a single trace of impurities in this place. The toddler seemed to have entered a unique state. He had forgotten about everything and couldn't be woken up in a short period of time. Moreover, his body was still moving forward. There was some kind of power in the depths that was constantly pulling the toddler. Lin Yu could barely resist the pulling force with the help of the ruler of God's badge. However, this was also something that Lin Yu didn't understand. It was reasonable for a child to be guided by an ancient corpse. But what was the reason for this? However, all of this could only be found out when they followed him to the depths. Lin Yu looked at the vast and unfathomable power of divine sense around him and did not stop. Instead, he continued to move forward in the direction that the child had floated to. No one knew how much time had passed. Lin Yu's perception of the outside world was very limited because of the strong consciousness of this place. As he went deeper and deeper, his five senses seemed to gradually disappear. In the end, he couldn't even sense the exact time. He didn't know how far or how long he had traveled. In front of him, a huge crystal appeared in the mist formed by his divine sense. It was like ice that had been frozen for hundreds of millions of years. Just by looking at it from afar, one would feel a chill run down their spines. At this moment, the child's body finally came to a stop. A faint barrier appeared in front of the crystal. It was this barrier that slowed down the child's advance toward the crystal. As time passed, the child was unable to enter it. Lin Yu was behind him. At this moment, the Divine King's token, which was close to the stone wall of the passageway under the volcano, started to move on its own. At this moment, the Divine King's token was emitting rays of light that intertwined in the space. With the power of immortality, it seemed like it was going to reverse the past, present, and future. Lin Yu's body was impacted, but he stood on the spot without moving. After so many years, he had completely gotten used to the power of time of the Divine King's token. However, the power of the Divine King's token disappeared as quickly as it came. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared, leaving no trace behind. Does this barrier require the power of the Divine King's token to break it? Lin Yu asked slowly as he looked at the barrier that was rippling due to the appearance of the Divine King's token. However, there was a puzzled look in his eyes at this moment. If the barrier here could only be broken by the power of the Divine King's token, then it was inevitable that he would come here. Was it the subtle influence of the Divine King's token, or was there something in the unseen world that was guiding it? Lin Yu became vigilant. At this moment, he suddenly realized something. The long history of the ancient world was like a long river, and the people in it were like the fish in it. They did not know the scenery outside the river. He did not know if there were people fishing outside the river. Is someone arranging the trajectory of my life? Lin Yu's eyes gradually turned cold. However, he did not know if it was true. If that was the case, it would be too sad. Lin Yu would not allow such a thing to happen. After a long time, Lin Yu slowly opened his eyes. His eyes had become extremely deep. It doesn't matter if there is someone or not. Since we need to break this barrier, let's break it, Lin Yu said. The power of the Divine King's token appeared in his hand. It was hazy and powerful, and it caused the endless power of the divine sense to retreat temporarily. Pop! It was like a drop of hot magma falling onto an ice surface. The power of the Divine King's token exploded the moment it came into contact with the barrier. At this moment, the barrier was slowly shattering until it completely dissipated at a certain point. It turned into essence, as if it had never appeared in this place. Chi, the young child, who had been floating in the air, suddenly stretched out his arms. Bright light burst out from his 7 orifices, completely illuminating the misty land of the ancient corpse's divine sense, making it incomparably clear. Then, the young child's body approached the crystal and finally began to slowly merge with it. This seemed to be some kind of inheritance. A divine pattern appeared on the young child's forehead. It was exactly the same as the pattern on the ancient corpse's forehead that Lin Yu saw before he entered. However, the divine pattern on the young child's forehead now seemed to be alive. It was even more mysterious than the ancient corpse's divine pattern. Is this the inheritance of the ancient corpse? Lin Yu muttered to himself as he looked at the young child whose aura was gradually becoming more and more intense. What he didn't know was whether the young child was a rebirth of the ancient corpse or a descendant that was deliberately left behind after it died. I am an ancient god, and I once participated in the Battle of Wusheng. I have a regret in my heart that I couldn't win. The successor should unlock the seal and receive part of my inheritance. A majestic voice sounded in Lin Yu's mind. An imposing figure appeared in Lin Yu's sea of consciousness. His hair was disheveled, and he was majestic. He looked down on the 33 heavenly palaces with an invincible demeanor. His body moved at this moment, causing the entire world to tremble. Cracks that were difficult to repair appeared one after another. This is the 3 moves of the ancient god. Each move has the power to destroy heaven and earth. The successor, watch carefully. The body in Lin Yu's sea of consciousness raised both hands. Divine patterns appeared on his arms, as if a real dragon was entrenched in it. It was extremely powerful. He started from the origin of the technique and evolved the 3 moves of the ancient god for Lin Yu. This was a kind of divine ability that could refine one's body. If it was mastered, one punch could kill all enemies. It emphasized on breaking all techniques with one strength. Lin Yu looked at the body in his sea of consciousness. On his arm, the divine runes gradually began to form. They originated from the inside of the body. These divine patterns were just the convergence and evolution of the power of the three moves of the ancient god. After it was mastered, it would naturally disappear. Chapter 1163. Lin Yu's battle constitution had improved once again. As time passed bit by bit, Lin Yu's strength was also increasing rapidly. At this moment, his physical body was emitting a holy light, as bright as the moon, shining brightly. When Lin Yu completely comprehended the three styles of the ancient god, his battle constitution had already broken through the over-god realm and reached the half-step progenitor realm. Moreover, it was a flawless progenitor realm battle constitution, which was much stronger than ordinary progenitors. Lin Yu slowly opened his eyes, and two rays of clear light shrouded the place. The power of his physical body swept through the entire ancient corpse. Boundless blood chi raged like a vast ocean. Lin Yu's black hair danced in the wind until all the aura was withdrawn. The place returned to silence. Lin Yu bowed slightly to the ancient god's corpse, expressing his gratitude for imparting the technique. At this moment, the blazing aura on the body of the young child, floating in the void, also withdrew. The divine rune on his forehead also gradually disappeared, and finally disappeared into his body. However, the young child at this moment gave off an extremely ordinary feeling. However, Lin Yu knew that, at this moment, the young child had completely inherited the legacy of this powerful ancient corpse, and the divine substance within had already returned to the young child's body. As long as he was given some guidance in the future, his future would definitely be limitless. I felt like I had a dream. So comfortable. The young child groaned and stretched his back. Can I go out now? He suddenly thought of this, and his mood immediately improved as he cheered. He skipped over to Lin Yu. Of course. Lin Yu nodded. At this moment, the young child had completely accepted the legacy of the ancient god. Under the perception of the God King's badge, there were no longer any restrictions in this place. After a few hours of settling down, Lin Yu and the young child walked out of the ancient corpse's body. As the young child walked out, the ancient corpse began to slowly shatter, and in the end, it turned into specks of light that dissipated into the world, as if it had never appeared or existed. The young child's heart unconsciously became heavy, and tears welled up in his eyes. However, the young child's temperament was cheerful, and he quickly adjusted himself. Can I follow you in the future? The young child pleaded. Sure. Lin Yu nodded. That place will be my big brother from now on, the young child said seriously. Lin Yu smiled and did not refuse. In terms of strength, Lin Yu had no doubt that he was no match for Toddler. The toddler had fully absorbed the legacy of the ancient god. With his current strength, if he were to unleash his full strength, he would be able to surpass even progenitor realm experts. At this moment, Lin Yu was leading the way in front. The two of them rode on the Emperor's swords and executed the Imperial sword technique. They turned into rainbow lights and quickly headed towards the top of the abyss. Looking at the rapidly changing scene, the young child cried out in surprise. Lin Yu's face was as calm as ever. He had no idea what was going on in the depths of the heaven burying. Before entering the abyss, he had used the unifying chi of universe to severely injure the two old sacred masters, Yu Ming and Gu Hu. However, even so, it would be difficult for Ancestor Lu alone to obtain the mysterious factor in the final battle, even if his Tao was unparalleled since ancient times. Now, Lin Yu's physical body had reached the half-step Ancestor realm. Coupled with his flawless cultivation and divine consciousness, it was not too difficult for him to hold back an Ancestor realm. Moreover, he had Toddler, his little brother who possessed the strength of an Ancestor realm, by his side. However, Lin Yu was secretly worried at this moment. He had been in the abyss for decades, and he did not know how far the battle had progressed. If 10 Square World was besieged again, it was very likely that they would have already retreated from the heaven burying. As the two of them moved forward quickly, "Big brother, is there any trouble ahead?" The young child was intelligent, and he could not help but ask when he saw Lin Yu's expression. Lin Yu nodded. "If anyone dares to cause trouble for Big Brother, I will destroy them all with one hand." Toddler waved his fist in a babbling manner. At this moment, he had truly treated Lin Yu as his big brother. Lin Yu was somewhat gratified by Toddler's words. He originally wanted to use Toddler's strength to hold back one or two people after encountering Ancient Pot, Netherworld, and Turbid Immortal Sacred Ground. He did not expect Toddler to take the initiative to ask. "Thank you." Lin Yu smiled at Toddler. "What did you say?" Toddler looked at Lin Yu with surprise, anger, and hurt in his eyes. "Thank you." Lin Yu was a little confused by Toddler's change in attitude. "How can you be so polite to me? Helping Big Brother is the right thing to do. Do you not recognize me? This is too hurtful." Toddler sighed. "You look down on me." Lin Yu did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Then when we see those people later, suppress them for me." Lin Yu's expression became serious with a commanding tone. "Okay." Toddler's expression changed immediately. "Just kill them." As he spoke, Toddler's expression became excited. The ancient god bloodline was constantly awakening in his body. "You don't have a name yet. In the future, you will follow my surname, okay?" Lin Yu asked. "That's great." Toddler was very happy. "My name is Lin Yu. Seeing that you are naturally warlike, Lin Yu." Lin Yu looked at Toddler. Toddler pondered for a while and frowned a little. "It's good, but I feel that it's still lacking a little domineering. I'm destined to become an existence that the heavens and earth fear." Toddler's eyes were in high spirits. "Since the heavens and earth can't restrain you, I'll call you Zhan Yu, Lin Zhan Yu." Lin Yu smiled. Toddler looked cute, naive, and chubby. Coupled with the name Lin Zhan Yu, there was an indescribable sense of joy. When Toddler heard this name, he was very excited. Zhan Yu, this name is good. In the future, I'll be called Lin Zhan Yu. The battle that will make me famous is here." Lin Zhan Yu had the aura of swallowing mountains and rivers. At this moment, his eyes were very bright as he looked straight ahead. The two of them were extremely fast. A few days passed. The origin material here was so dense that it couldn't be dissolved. Moreover, it was very pure. Even if one didn't deliberately absorb it, one's body would feel comfortable as if one was soaking in a hot spring in the celestial world. If one stayed here, even a pig would be able to attain the great Tao. However, Lin Yu sensed that there seemed to be a terrifying threat contained within. This threat couldn't be described, but it came from the origin. Not only Lin Yu, but all living beings who entered this place would also sense it. This was also the reason why Gu Hu and Old Saint Lord Yuming didn't choose to stay here. Instead, they took a step back and found a secret place in the periphery of the burial of heavens to cultivate for 1,000,000 years. Lin Yu guessed that the threat here had a lot to do with the mysterious factor that could help the 10 great monster kings escape. At this moment, Lin Yu noticed that something was wrong with Lin Zhan Yu and couldn't help but ask. Lin Zhan Yu suppressed his fear. His chubby little face was scrunched up. One couldn't help but laugh. In the deepest part ahead, there seems to be a coffin shrouded in endless black gas. However, the corpse inside is incomparably holy and exudes a white supreme substance. At this moment, the toddler explained. Because of his special bloodline, he could see the scene in the deepest part. Now, he told Lin Yu what he saw. These words piqued Lin Yu's curiosity. "I didn't expect that there would be a coffin in the deepest part. I don't know what the black gas is, but the white supreme substance that I mentioned must be the mysterious factor." Lin Yu looked at the unknown place in front of him. "Do you sense the aura of other living beings?" The toddler's perception was very strong, especially when he was here. He could see through the illusion and see very far away. Lin Yu told Lin Zhan Yu about the aura of Ancestor Lu and the others. Lin Zhan Yu closed his eyes and extended his divine consciousness. After a while, he pointed to the northwest. In this direction, they are very close to the coffin. However, there are a few other auras around them. After Lin Yu heard Lin Zhan Yu's feedback, he more or less understood. The people of 10 Square World should have been besieged again and fallen into a passive state. Without the slightest delay, Lin Yu circulated his cultivation and quickly headed in the northwest direction. Chapter 1164. The origin material here grew denser and denser. It was enough to obscure the divine consciousness of living beings. Lin Yu circulated his cultivation with all his might. His eyes shone like torches as he stared straight ahead. The origin material seemed to have opened up a path on its own, illuminating the path ahead. A few figures appeared in the misty land. The slender figure at the front was covered in blood. He held an immortal sword in his hand as his chest heaved up and down. However, his eyes were still peerless, as if they could cut through the sun, moon, and stars. Behind him was the second palace master. Facing the attacks of 3 progenitor realm experts at the same time, he did not flinch at all. That strange over-god brat is no longer here. Do you think you can defy the heavens by yourself? The old sacred master of the ancient pot, Sacred Ground, sneered. Although he had yet to recover from his serious injuries, under the suppression of the turbid, immortal, old holy master, Ancestor Lu had already suffered extremely serious injuries. His origin was almost shattered. Although Ancestor Lu's aura was still blazing, he could barely hold on. Brother Lu, you should leave. The second palace master's eyes were teary. You've done enough. Even the sacred masters of the 10-direction world couldn't bear to see Ancestor Lu die. Their 10-direction world owed Ancestor Lu too much. Ancestor Lu, you should leave. The 10-direction world's holy master sighed. We only have ourselves to blame for our current predicament. If Ancestor Lu was at his peak, the 3 sacred grounds might not be his match, even if they worked together. However, the current sacred master of the 10-direction world used a formation to destroy his origin. In the end, it was all because of him, the 10-direction world's sacred master, who was the source of everything. The sacred master of the 10-direction world bowed, as if he was apologizing. Then, Ancestor Lu left. I'm not here for the 10-direction world. I'm here for you. Blood trickled from the corner of Ancestor Lu's mouth. His words were very direct. However, he didn't care about what the 10-direction world did 1,000,000 years ago. He only signaled to the sacred master of the 10-direction world that there was no need for him to do so. When we first met, I already said that I would protect you for a lifetime. Now, I won't watch you be in danger. Ancestor Lu only spoke a few words indifferently with a smile on his face. At this moment, the second palace lord looked at Patriarch Lu. It was as if he had returned to 1,000,000 years ago when they first met in the Forbidden Grounds. Ancestor Lu's invincible grace was still imprinted in his mind. However, he was now past his prime. Ancestor Lu appeared very powerless, facing 3 Ancestor Realm powerhouses. This caused everyone's eyes to turn gloomy. Ancestors, the situation might change if we delay any longer. Let's kill them quickly. The 10 Square World's prospective Holy Son whispered into the old Holy Master's ear. You're shameless. You've wasted the efforts of the Holy Master and the others. Bai Yu stepped forward and angrily rebuked the 10 Square World prospective Holy Prince who was trying to flatter her. I'm not a member of the Heavenly Fox clan. No matter how you treat me, I'm still an outsider. The 10 Square World's candidate's face was filled with disdain. Due to Lin Yu's appearance, Luo Yinyang felt that Bai Yu's heart had wavered. Along the way, his state of mind had undergone a great change, almost to the point of being twisted. Therefore, he submitted to the 3 holy lands and exposed 10 Square World's location to them. Everyone from 10 Square World glared at the 10 Square World prospective Holy Prince. A bird chooses a tree to perch on. It's useless to say more. You've already lost. The 10 Square World's prospective Holy Prince said coldly. He quickly turned his head and said flatteringly, Ancestor, remember to leave Bai Yu to me. No problem. After we eliminate the remnants of 10 Square World, Bai Yu's little girl is yours to ravage. The old Holy Master of the ancient Pot Holy Land nodded with a smile. Thank you, Ancestor. The 10 Square World's prospective Holy Prince bowed. Traitor of 10 Square World, you disgrace. Do you think you can get me like this? What a joke. Bai Yu looked at him coldly. She had already made up her mind. If Ancestor Lu lost, she would commit suicide. She would never let that disgusting person get away with it. It's not up to you. The 10 Square World's prospective Holy Prince said. If I can't get your heart, I'll get your body. Even if it's despicable, I won't hesitate. You'll never know my feelings for you. I didn't expect 10 Square World to raise such a person. The 10 Square World's Holy Lord sighed. The old Holy Master of Ancient Pot and the others didn't give 10 Square World any more chances. The three of them joined forces and used their strongest moves. Signs of instability appeared in this space. All of the power poured towards Patriarch Lu. We can't sleep together in life. We'll die together. The 10 Square World's second Palace Master came to Ancestor Lu's side. Facing the power pouring down from the sky, he didn't show the slightest bit of fear. Ancestor Lu looked at the second Palace Master's determined expression and sighed. His weathered face was filled with gentleness. He stopped resisting and joined hands with the second Palace Master. Even an ancestor would perish in the face of this attack. The remnants of the 10 Square World. After today, you won't appear in this world anymore. Your branch will decline completely, said the old saint of the turbid, immortal Holy Land. His chi was at its peak, and his face was filled with cruelty. There wasn't the slightest bit of pity, just when the people of 10 Square World had given up resisting. Suddenly, a mighty wave of power came from outside the sky. As long as I live, 10 Square World will not be destroyed. The sky was torn apart. Lin Yu came with Lin Zhanyu on the Imperial Sword. How dare you bully my big brother's people? Lin Zhanyu's chubby little face was filled with anger. The aura on his body became more and more intense. Boundless blood chi erupted from his tiny body, wreaking havoc in this place like a vast ocean. Everyone present couldn't help but raise their eyebrows. They were all shocked. Who could have such vigorous blood chi? It seemed that the blood chi was intertwined with primitive patterns. This was the sign of a battle constitution reaching the pinnacle. He was definitely an ancestor, and his battle constitution was very powerful. The old Holy Master of Ancient Pot was the first to bear the brunt. Lin Zhanyu took a step forward in the void and punched out directly. Boundless blood chi came crashing down. The old Holy Master of Ancient Pot, who was already injured, felt the power in his body stagnate. He couldn't use it all. Brother Nether, save me. The old Holy Master of Ancient Pot Holy Ground was shocked. Fear appeared on his face for the first time. He was retreating, but Lin Zhanyu had already locked onto him. He couldn't move at all. Puff! It happened so suddenly that even the old Holy Master of turbid, immortal Holy Ground couldn't react in time. The old Holy Master of Ancient Pot was beaten into a bloody mist by Lin Zhanyu. The vitality of an ancestor was strong. However, after being struck by this punch, his broken body was only able to reconstruct itself with great difficulty. The damage to his origin was extremely severe, and his cultivation level had already dropped. Can't take a beating. Lin Zhanyu retreated to Lin Yu's side. Boss, is this an expert from the outside world? How dare he boast like that? Lin Zhanyu's face was filled with doubt. The old Holy Master of Ancient Pot almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He thought to himself, that person from turbid, immortal Holy Ground said it. What does it have to do with me? His face turned green and purple. In his opinion, Lin Zhanyu was just a child. He didn't expect that after millions of years of cultivation, he would be ridiculed like this. Chapter 1165. This made him, an old monster who had lived for millions of years, have a very ugly expression. However, it was not good to show it. Who are you? At this time, the old Saint Lord of the turbid immortal sacred ground looked coldly at Lin Zhanyu, who had suddenly appeared. When the embers dissipated, only then did Lin Yu's figure slowly emerge. This caused everyone present to be astonished. You're not dead. The old Saint Lord looked at Lin Yu with a face full of disbelief. He had seen with his own eyes that Lin Yu had used a forbidden divine ability in front of him. His body had exploded, and his divine sense had collapsed. Even a heavenly god would find it difficult to save him. At this time, Lin Yu was standing in front of them safely. Senior, when Bai Yu saw Lin Yu's figure, she was surprised and happy, and her eyes bloomed with splendor. I'm fine, Lin Yu just said lightly. It seems that he has obtained an unimaginable good fortune, Ancestor Lu said slowly with a smile on his face. Although Lin Yu's physical body was not as strong as the little fat boy who had suddenly appeared, the unique aura of the Ancestor realm had already appeared on the surface of his body, and it was very condensed, almost about to break through to the Ancestor realm. Your grandfather is Brother Lin Yu's little brother. Why aren't you kneeling down? Lin Jianyu spoke like an old man, as if he was passing judgment on the world. What a rude little boy. Aren't you afraid that the wind will bite your tongue? The old Saint Lord's face also became ugly. You don't worship gods? You've lost your life. Lin Jianyu stood out, and his qi and blood became stronger again. I'll beat you down. Lin Jianyu moved. At this time, facing a real Ancestor realm expert, he did not have the slightest fear. On the contrary, his eyes were blazing with fighting spirit. He had the momentum to conquer the heavens. He stepped in the void, not showing the slightest cultivation base, and only relying on the strength of his physical body. He could stay in the air. Such a powerful physical body was shocking. The old Saint Lord was facing a huge pressure. At this moment, old Saint Lord Netherworld's injuries had yet to heal. Only he could fight Lin Jianyu head-on. This made his expression turn ugly. The turbid immortal old sacred master had been preserving his strength all this time. However, it seemed like he could no longer conceal it. Lin Jianyu immediately locked onto him. Although Lin Jianyu's cultivation base had yet to truly break through to the Ancestor realm, but it was a blood qi that overflowed the heavens. This was beyond their understanding. Even after living for such a long time, he had never seen such a monster, and judging from his age, he was definitely not old. At such a young age, he already possessed such battle prowess. It was truly chilling. Moreover, the baby said very naturally that Lin Yu was his big brother. Why didn't this little child appear when the Ten Direction world was fighting a bitter battle? At this moment, the three old holy lords subconsciously looked at Lin Yu, trying to guess his identity. Lin Yu's appearance was very sudden. They didn't know where Ten Square World had come from. However, the three old sacred masters found it increasingly difficult to see through him. In just a few short years, not only did he come back from the dead, but his strength had also improved again. At this moment, they didn't have the slightest doubt about the aura emitted from his body. It was definitely enough to threaten them. And Lin Yu's cultivation base was still at the over-god realm. How stunning was this kind of person? Perhaps in the 10 great holy lands, such a person hadn't appeared for a long time. And in the 10 great holy lands, the human race's strength was weak. The resources they could obtain were just a little bit. It was simply a fool's dream to give birth to such a talented person. However, such a person had appeared in front of them. Not only Lin Yu, but also Ancestor Lu. This shocked them even more. Lin Jianyu was already fighting with the old holy lord of the turbid immortal holy ground. Lin Yu slowly looked at the ancient pot holy lord. He had suffered from Lin Jianyu's punch. At this moment, his vitality was greatly damaged. His cultivation base had already dropped to the half-step Ancestor realm. He needed a long time to recover. Obviously, Lin Yu wouldn't give him such a chance. His aura directly locked onto ancient pot and the old holy lord Yuming. Senior Ancestor Lu, rest for a while. It's enough for me to kill them. Lin Yu said casually. He faced ancient pot and the old holy lord Yuming and said indifferently, attack together. His tone was filled with disdain. It wasn't boasting. Lin Yu truly had the confidence to say such words to the two Ancestor realm experts. Everyone in the 10 Square world was worried for Lin Yu. Although ancient pot and the old holy lord Yuming were injured, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Lin Yu's current cultivation base was still only at the over-god realm. Their cultivation base wasn't high enough to see through Lin Yu's current state. Only Ancestor Lu nodded slightly. Be careful. Without hesitation, Ancestor Lu sat cross-legged on the ground and began to heal his injured body. Arrogant. Do you think you can do whatever you want just because your physical body has touched the threshold of the ancestor realm? The old Holy Lord Yuming was furious. He felt that he was being looked down upon. Noisy, Lin Yu only said indifferently. He directly interrupted the old Holy Lord Yuming's words. Then he directly charged forward. His current cultivation base was indeed behind the two ancestor realm experts. However, they were all injured by Lin Yu's Qian Kuan Qi, especially the old Holy Lord Gu Hu. He was even worse after Lin Zhanyu's punch. At this moment, Lin Yu seemed to have entered a no-man's land. On the other side, the 10 Square World's prospective saints saw that the situation was hopeless and wanted to sneak away. Ancient Pot and the old Holy Lord Yuming couldn't even take care of themselves. Lin Yu directly destroyed the 10 Square World's prospective saint cultivation base and threw him in front of the 10 Square World's Holy Lord. The 10 Square World prospective saint revealed a look of fear. Everything happened too quickly. Under Lin Yu's attack, his Saint Realm cultivation base was directly destroyed like a helpless child. He didn't even have time to scream in pain. The 10 Square World's Holy Lord directly killed him. His body and soul were destroyed, leaving no trace behind. Now, Lin Yu began to look at Ancient Pot and the old Holy Lord Yuming. The fist in his hand was blazing, as bright as the sun. For a moment, people couldn't open their eyes. At this moment, the old Holy Lord Gu Hu felt an inexplicable sense of fear in his heart. He began to realize that if he continued to fight, he might really die here. This inexplicable feeling appeared. However, it was quickly suppressed. I am an ancestor realm expert. How can I be afraid of ants? He made his move. Between his arms, a flying immortal force appeared. One could vaguely see the illusory figure of one of the 10 great monster kings behind him. It was as if it was on a tear the sky apart. As the old Holy Lord Gu Hu's blood essence began to slowly merge into the illusory figure, one of the 10 great monster kings seemed to be awakening, crossing the seal and descending into the world. Summon the ancestor. The 18th generation descendant of the ancient Pot Monster King welcomes the arrival of the ancestor. The old Holy Lord Gu Hu mumbled as if he was reciting an ancient sacrificial language. An immense pressure came crashing down. Lin Yu's sleeves fluttered in the wind. Lin Yu stood under the illusory figure, looking extremely small. However, there was still no trace of fear in his eyes. Lin Yu merged with the summoned Azura figure and rushed into the sky. "Ants, why don't you bow to the king?" A majestic voice sounded. The illusory figures of the 10 great monster kings seemed to have gained consciousness. At this moment, he looked at Lin Yu indifferently. However, he didn't get a reply. Lin Yu used the 3 moves of the ancient god and directly defeated him. The illusory figure became unstable. The old Holy Lord Gu Hu spat out a mouthful of blood and flew out of the ground, creating a huge crater. Chapter 1166. 3 moves of the ancient god. At this moment, the expressions of the 10 great demon kings' phantoms changed slightly. It was as if such a superpower should not appear in this world. The origin of the ancient god was very mysterious. Even the 10 monster kings did not know all of its secrets. The old holy master of ancient Pot and the others did not know anything about it. Terrifying runes intertwined on Lin Yu's body. They were dark gold in color and looked like a huge dragon. Lin Yu's vital energy was like an ocean. At some point, he seemed to have surpassed the Master God realm and reached the Ancestor realm. He was exuding a terrifying power. At this time, Lin Yu's black hair had turned dark gold. He was like a god at the beginning of the world. He was cold and powerful. The aura he exuded made people want to kneel down and worship him. The ancient gorged shadow of one of the 10 demon kings slowly dissipated. It could not withstand the ancient god aura that Lin Yu exuded. The old holy master of ancient Pot's aura was weak, and he looked like he was about to die. The light in his eyes dimmed. Lin Yu was very satisfied with the power displayed by the 3 moves of the ancient god. It had even exceeded his expectations. At this time, Lin Yu stood in the sky. He was surrounded by lightning. This was a phenomenon that was displayed by his extreme physical strength. Bai Yu's eyes were full of splendor. Lin Yu gave him the feeling that he was invincible. His aura made everyone feel solemn. Lin Yu took a step forward. The void cracked inch by inch under his footsteps, and it took a long time for it to recover. The old holy master of ancient pot had lost his ability to fight. Lin Yu's target was the old holy master of Netherworld. At this time, Lin Yu relied on the power of his physical body to shrink the ground into an inch. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of the old holy master of Netherworld. Boom! Cracks appeared in the void. The old holy master of Netherworld could not react in time. When he saw Lin Yu's fist light, Lin Yu had already arrived in front of him. The fist light was vast. There wasn't the slightest bit of skill to speak of. His movements were open and wide, and there was a sense of great ingenuity. This was the punch. The old holy master of Netherworld coughed up blood as he resisted. Lin Yu did not stop at all. He caught up with the old holy master of Netherworld. Another punch. The old holy master of Netherworld roared. He was unwilling and furious. He refused to believe that a mere overgod, who was only an ant in his eyes, would actually be unable to fight back at all. Even a simple parry was no longer possible. If I was at my peak, you would not, the old holy master of Netherworld said. However, he had forgotten that the injuries on his body were also caused by Lin Yu. Lin Yu said sarcastically, "If I were given 1,000,000 years, you would be nothing but an ant." In the 10-square world, the three palace masters who knew Lin Yu knew that Lin Yu's words were not without reason. From ancestor by Xiaoli, they knew that Lin Yu had only cultivated for a few 100,000 years. An overgod cultivator at such a young age. And he could fight an ancestor without being defeated. He could even suppress an injured ancestor. He had not appeared since the birth of the 10 sacred lands. With Lin Yu's talent, it was not impossible for him to surpass the ancestor in 1,000,000 years. At least, he could become the strongest existence in the ancestor. The old holy master of Netherworld was silent. This was contempt. However, he couldn't say a single word of rebuttal. He could also sense that time had not left much of Lin Yu's aura. This also meant that Lin Yu's cultivation age was indeed very young. I will let you know what it means to be strong. The old holy master of Netherworld was really angry. Black mist began to surge on his body. It directly covered the entire area. His body was expanding infinitely, and soon it had exceeded 10,000 feet. His ferocious eyes, like the sun and moon, descended into the depths of the burial of heaven. As he breathed, a large amount of origin matter was absorbed by him, and after he spat it out, it had turned into a pitch-black color. The old holy master of Netherworld was like a monster born at the beginning of the chaos. Heaven and earth could not accommodate his figure. It was as if he was going to burst the sky. Lin Yu's figure stood in front of him, very small and almost invisible. Then, a fist light illuminated the universe. Lin Yu directly fought with the old holy master of Netherworld, who had turned into a giant beast at this time. The terrifying aura directly enveloped the void. It made the place where the two of them fought illusory, no longer real. At this time, they seemed to have transcended by relying on their physical bodies. The majestic aura of the burial of heaven could not trap them. Lin Yu's small body was filled with monstrous blood qi, and at this time, under the support of the 3 moves of the ancient god, it became incomparably dense. The divine runes between his arms were intertwined with lightning, and his eyes were like torches shining brightly. Then, the terrifying fluctuations swept through the sky and earth. The origin matter here was sucked dry. It formed a vacuum, and all the light was swallowed up. Under the fluctuations, the Saint Realm's eyes became slack. At this level, even if they used all their cultivation, they would not be able to see through it. All the creatures in 10-square world and ancient pot holy ground who were watching the battle, their eyes were in pain, and 2 streams of blood flowed out. Some even had their divine consciousness about to collapse. Only the experts in the Divine King realm could barely see what was happening in the sky at this time. Rumble. Violent fluctuations hit. A rain of blood fell from the sky. Every drop of true blood contained a mighty aura. The ground in the depths of the burial of heaven, which had existed since ancient times, was now full of devastation. The power nurtured by the true blood shattered the ground, turning it into a huge crater. Lin Yu's body was bathed in the rain of blood at this time, and he appeared in front of everyone. The huge body of the old netherworld saint also fell from the sky at this time, and there was not a trace of life in it. His life had been cut short. Everyone present sucked in a breath of cold air. They had witnessed the immortal slaying. Lin Yu, who was in the Overgod realm, killed an ancestor realm expert directly. In the history of the 10 great holy grounds, there are only a few ancestor realm experts. At this time, one of them had died. This was no doubt a huge earthquake. Moreover, the netherworld holy ground was destroyed not long after entering the burial of heaven. Now that the old netherworld saint was killed, it could be said that the netherworld holy ground was completely finished. It would be difficult for them to recover after such a long time. The holy ground's forces that entered were completely destroyed. This had never happened before in the years since the grand event began. Even 1,000,000 years ago, when the 3 holy grounds joined forces to besiege the 10-direction world, they did not completely destroy it. At this time, everyone realized how powerful Lin Yu, who was bathed in the true blood of the old netherworld saint, was now. His appearance directly broke the current situation of the 10 great holy grounds. Moreover, they all knew how important this grand event was. There were many ancestor realm experts, not just the netherworld holy grounds, ancient pot, and turbid immortals. The other forces also had ancestor realm experts. But now, one of them had been killed by Lin Yu. He was not the only ancestor realm expert who had died. At this time, Lin Yu's gaze fell on the old netherworld saint. Lin Yu's face was cold. However, he already had a better way to kill the old netherworld saint. A terrifying devouring power attacked. Lin Yu had not used devouring the starry sky for a long time, and now he used it again. He wanted to absorb the old netherworld saint's cultivation to help him break through to the ancestor realm. If he had not obtained the fortune of the ancient god, he might not have had such thoughts. However, he now had a flawless half-step ancestor realm physical body, so he might be able to give it a try. Absorbing the cultivation of an ancestor realm expert was the fastest way for Lin Yu to break through to the next realm. The old netherworld saint's face changed drastically. Lin Yu's divine ability was just too terrifying. He could already feel the origin energy in his body flowing away, gradually being absorbed by Lin Yu. Moreover, this was no longer under the control of the old netherworld saint. He was an ancestor realm expert, but now he could only be manipulated by an overgod. No! The old netherworld saint screamed in horror. Everyone felt their scalps go numb when they saw this. As time passed, the old netherworld saint's body and soul were destroyed, and he no longer existed in this world. The divine ability of devouring the starry sky was gradually withdrawn. Lin Yu slowly opened his eyes. The power of the old netherworld saint was stored in his body. The power of an ancestor realm expert was very powerful, and he needed time to refine it. Chapter 1167. On Lin Zhanyu's side, the battle was almost set. The turbid immortal sacred ground's old sacred lord coughed out blood continuously. Suppressed by Lin Zhanyu's blood chi, all his spells and divine abilities were destroyed under a single punch. Especially after Lin Yu killed Yu Ming and Gu Hu's old sacred lord. The turbid immortal sacred lord was even more flustered now, constantly on guard against Lin Yu's attack. However, Lin Zhanyu was already in the mood to kill. Seeing that he maintained the upper hand, Lin Yu only watched from the side, guarding against the turbid immortal sacred ground's old sacred lord's escape. As time went by, the last turbid immortal sacred lord exploded into a bloody mist under Lin Zhanyu's fist. Everything was settled. The people of 10 Square World quickly cleaned up the battlefield. The remnants of the turbid immortals were all killed. No one escaped. Lin Yu and the others looked into the depths. At this moment, the power of the mysterious factor had begun to spread. It was magnificent and vast. The depths of the burial of heaven seemed to be splitting heaven and earth. This place was filled with a dense fog that concealed one's spiritual sense. There's still 6 sacred grounds ahead. We can't be careless. After a few hours, Ancestor Lu's injuries were healed. After hundreds of years in the burial of heaven, Ancestor Lu's strength was gradually moving towards his peak. After the battle, he was already in the half-step progenitor realm. His strength was very solid. He was almost only 1 step away from the progenitor realm. At this moment, Ancestor Lu's aura was increasingly restrained. However, Lin Yu and the others did not doubt that Ancestor Lu definitely had the strength to kill a progenitor realm expert. The current lineup of 10 Square World could be said to be on par with the entire 10 Great Sacred Grounds. They almost had the battle strength of 3 progenitors at the same time. Unsurprisingly, the outcome of the battle had already been decided. As Lin Yu and the others entered the deepest part of the burial of heaven, the expressions of the other Sacred Land's forces changed upon hearing this. Someone sighed softly. The sacred grounds they were in did not have any progenitor realm experts. Now, even if they entered the deepest part of the burial of heavens, it would be difficult for them to obtain the mysterious factor. Therefore, they were very magnanimous. They cupped their hands towards Lin Yu and the others, acknowledging Lin Yu. Then, the tokens in their hands lit up. Their figures slowly disappeared from this place. The other 2 forces also did the same. As for the remaining 2 holy lands, the Sea of Misery and the Permitha, after a moment of hesitation, even the Ancestor Stage experts ultimately chose to withdraw. The 10 Direction World's Saint Sovereigns cupped their fists to show their respect. In the end, they waited for another 20 years and finally obtained the mysterious factor that was emitting white light. The 10 Direction World's Holy Lord placed the mysterious factor into a special container. There was an unconcealable joy in his eyes. After obtaining the mysterious factor, their old ancestor, by Shaoli, would be able to escape. This was the wish of many generations of the 10 Square World's people, who had sacrificed their lives for it. The light of departure shone. The people from the 10 Square World slowly appeared on the altar. After that, the group didn't stop and continued on their way back. The journey was very lonely. However, everyone was in a very good mood. 10 Square World, Heavenly Island. Bai Shaoli was already waiting for them in the main hall. He had received news that the 10 Square World had obtained the origin substance. This also meant that his physical body was about to be freed. At that time, even heaven and earth wouldn't be able to restrain him. Lin Yu and the others slowly entered the main hall under the watchful eyes of all the living beings in the 10 Square World. They were the heroes of the 10 Square World. They could be said to be the founders of the immortal world. Because of them, their old ancestor could definitely lead the 10 Square World into a new era. The 10 Square World would no longer be a barren and desolate place. Because of the escape of a supreme expert like Bai Shaoli, the destroyed world would return to its former peak. "You're back." Bai Shaoli was overjoyed. He took the initiative to walk down the main hall to welcome them. "We didn't disappoint the old ancestor. We brought back the mysterious factor." The Holy Lord knelt on the ground and slowly raised the container that contained the mysterious factor above his head. "Good, very good." Although Bai Shaoli had lived for a long time, she had been trapped in the seal of the 10 Square World for too long. Now that she finally had a chance to break free, how could she not be happy? "It's all thanks to God King Lin Yu and Ancestor Lu that we were able to obtain the mysterious factor." The Holy Lord of the 10 Square World didn't hide anything and reported to Bai Shaoli. Bai Shaoli nodded. "Ancestor Lu, I can fulfill my promise to you now." "Thank you, Senior." Ancestor Lu cupped his hands. "Let's pick a date to get married on Heavenly Island." Bai Shaoli smiled. The second palace master's face flushed red. "Old ancestor, now is not the time to talk about this. It's getting late." The third palace master teased. The main hall was filled with laughter. Bai Shaoli looked at Lin Yu. "There's no need to say anything between us." Lin Yu smiled. I also contributed a lot and killed an old man." Lin Jianyu was a little dissatisfied. He jumped and came to Bai Shaoli's side. Only then did Bai Shaoli notice Lin Jianyu. Looking at the faintly discernible divine mark on his forehead, Bai Xiaoli fell into deep thought. "Little kid, where are you from?" Bai Xiaoli's eyes were deep, and she was interested in Lin Jianyu. "My name is Lin Jianyu, and I'm from Heaven Burial." "Lin Jianyu? My big brother named me," Lin Jianyu said proudly. At this time, Bai Xiaoli had already guessed Lin Jianyu's identity. He muttered in his heart, "Seems like the chaos of the world is about to start again. Even the ancient gods are beginning to manifest." However, he still smiled and said, "You're not bad. I should express my gratitude to you. Since Big Brother doesn't need it, I naturally don't need it either." Lin Jianyu refused. Everyone couldn't help but laugh when they saw this chubby kid speaking in such a serious manner. However, some of them knew Lin Jianyu's combat strength, and their faces were filled with respect. After all, in this world, the strong were respected. No matter how young Lin Jianyu looked, they couldn't show the slightest disdain. Everyone in the 10-square world celebrated. The banquet began, and the heavenly island was filled with music and dancing. On the second day, Ancestor Lu and the second palace master got married. Bai Xiaoli personally presided over the wedding. Today, the two clans are united by marriage, and a promise is made. Our fate will be sealed forever, and we will be called the same. Today, the peach blossoms are shining brightly, and it's a suitable home. I predict that the melons will blossom continuously, and everyone will prosper. Solemnly, we promise to write a letter to the Red Leaves Alliance and record it in the Mandarin book. The Saint Lord's face was filled with reluctance as he recited a congratulatory message. The second palace master wore a rainbow dress and a beaded curtain on her head. The corners of her eyes were moist. Lin Yu and the others presented their congratulatory gifts. Bai Yu's eyes were filled with envy, but her heart was filled with sadness, because she knew that it was impossible for her to be with her beloved. The wedding lasted for 7 days, until the morning of the 8th day. Under Bai Xiaoli's lead, everyone from the 10-square world came to the ancient altar of the 10-square world. This was the place where Bai Xiaoli was sealed. Lin Yu was very familiar with this place. At this time, Bai Xiaoli had once again possessed Lin Yu's body. The power of the seal permeated the air, and it had a great influence on Bai Xiaoli. Chapter 1168. Bai Xiaoli was not the only one who had a retreat. Even the Heavenly Fox clansmen had retreated far away due to the power of the seal. Only Lin Yu, Lin Jianyu, and Lu Zhu were left. Breaking the seal was of great importance. They needed someone to protect them. Lin Yu held the vessel that contained the mysterious factor. At this moment, he slowly walked towards the altar. Lin Yu chanted the ancient sacrificial language. The space around the altar became very unstable. At this time, Lin Yu slowly opened the seal. The mysterious factor inside began to flow into the altar like water. The origin of the mysterious factor was very mysterious. No one knew where it came from. However, this power was very mysterious and had a great effect on breaking the seal. As the mysterious factor flowed into the altar, the power of the seal on the altar began to boil. It was very violent. In the past years, after the 10-square world obtained the mysterious factor, they would choose one of their clansmen to sacrifice. Because since the birth of the 10-square world, no one had been able to resist the power of the seal. Strength was one factor. The main factor was the bloodline of the living beings in the 10-square world. The sky above the altar was gradually covered by blood-red clouds. Lin Yu stood under it, motionless. He waved his hands and cast a mysterious spell. Following a special direction, it hit various parts of the altar. The seal was loosening. At this time, Bai Xiaoli and Lin Yu's body was also using her power to connect with the body in the seal. This was related to Bai Xiaoli's escape. Everyone's brows were tightly knitted, and because they had to break the seal completely. The danger this time was very great. Even Bai Xiaoli had told Lin Yu not to take the risk and to break the seal by himself. But this way, the chances were much smaller. In the 10-square world, only Lin Yu and Bai Xiaoli's aura were compatible and would not be rejected by the seal. Lin Yu did not agree to Bai Xiaoli's suggestion. as the fluctuation of the seal became stronger and stronger. It had already far exceeded the limits of what this piece of land could bear. The earth was turning into nothingness, and even the stars in outer space were exploding. Lin Yu's half-step ancestor physical body was gradually unable to endure, and cracks began to appear. Seeing this, Ancestor Liu and Lin Zhanyu simultaneously channeled their power into Lin Yu's body. It temporarily stabilized Lin Yu's body that was heading towards nirvana. The cracking trend was alleviated. At this time, the seal had already been opened. Below the altar, a boundless shadow of a demonic beast appeared. As the seal slowly unraveled, an unparalleled pressure was formed, and Bai Xiaoli's true form was reflected in the skies. The size of its body was even larger than a continent. However, its fur was dim, as if it had already lost its vitality and divinity. He had been trapped in the seal for far too long. Even though the powers of the 10 demon kings were hard to fathom, Bai Xiaoli's physical body was still damaged to a certain extent under the corrosion of time. Now, Bai Xiaoli, who was in Lin Yu's body, suddenly opened his eyes. He turned into a ray of light and directly entered his body. His divine consciousness and physical body merged into one. Bai Xiaoli, who was below the altar, had runes densely covering her 9 fox tails, as if there were worlds being born and destroyed on them. One could see a bright world evolving on the foxtails. Nirvana. This was an existence that surpassed the ancestor realm. On their bodies, there was the most original Tao law. There was no doubt that existences at the level of the 10 demon kings could easily destroy the living beings of a universe. This kind of Tao law was too terrifying. Even if it was not deliberately emitted, it still made the living beings of the 10-direction world, who were extremely far away, feel waves of palpitations. They subconsciously knelt on the ground, incomparably pious. Welcome, Ancestor, for breaking the seal. Everyone's voices gathered together, becoming incomparably grand. At this time, Bai Xiaoli's backup plan also appeared. It was the power of will that had been in the 10-direction world since ancient times. Now it was gathering from all over the 10-direction world. Bai Xiaoli, who was below the altar, opened his eyes incomparably cold. At this time, his crawling body was also struggling to break the shackles of the seal. Only Lin Yu and a few others knew that this was far from enough. The power of the seal was too strong. Although Bai Xiaoli's methods were heaven-defying, most of the power had been worn down over the years. At this time, although there was the destruction of the mysterious factor, it still seemed a little powerless. Break! Bai Xiaoli roared in the seal, his face gradually becoming distorted. He had waited for this day for too long, and he absolutely could not give up so easily. Now his divine consciousness and physical body had merged into one. If he failed, he would fall into the seal again and could only wait for endless years. This was not something he would allow. Lin Yu, who was outside the seal, also used all of his strength at this time. He did not hesitate to use the space-time power of the God King's token. Several kinds of extremely strong forces of heaven and earth gathered together. The power of will was also constantly attacking the seal, exerting force from both inside and outside. At this moment, the seal was on the verge of collapsing. It seemed like it could break at any time. However, this remaining power of the seal was as indestructible as a boulder. At this moment, Bai Xiaoli, who was within the seal, was also gradually showing signs of being unable to hold on. The God King's token within Lin Yu's body began to move. At this moment, Lin Yu did not hesitate at all as he threw himself into the seal. "What are you doing in here?" Bai Xiaoli's face was filled with anxiety. He had a premonition of his own condition. It was very likely that he would not be able to break out of the seal. At this moment, Lin Yu had actually taken the initiative to jump into the seal. If he failed, Lin Yu might be left here forever. Furthermore, his strength was only that of a master god. He would definitely not be able to withstand the power of the seal. It would not be long before his body and soul would be destroyed. "Don't worry," Lin Yu gestured. He was not a reckless person. Bai Xiaoli, who had been with him for so long, naturally knew this well. However, in front of a powerful seal, there was still no room for carelessness. The God King's token within Lin Yu's body emitted a power that could reverse time. It temporarily restored by Xiaoli's strength. As Lin Yu waved his hand, the God King's token erupted with a different kind of power. It was extremely mysterious and involved some kind of origin of the universe. Bai Xiaoli's expression changed slightly. I misjudged previously. I did not expect it to be this kind of power. At this moment, Bai Xiaoli could see the mystery of the God King's token within Lin Yu's body. There was a look of reminiscence in his eyes. However, he did not continue to be shocked. The plan now was to break out of the seal on his body. Bai Xiaoli's body once again erupted with a powerful power of origin. Rumble. Under this terrifying impact, more than half of the lower 5 elements continent was shattered. At this moment, the seal was also completely shattered. The 9-tailed celestial fox, Bai Xiaoli, was completely free. Chapter 11:69. The unique aura of a monster king wreaked havoc in this world. This was definitely an aura that surpassed the progenitor realm. It was as if the Tao laws of the entire world were prostrating under its feet. Lin Yu was wrapped in a gentle beam of light and teleported outside. In the world, lightning intertwined. Bai Xiaoli's true body, 9 foxtails, pierced through the entire 10-square world. The terrifying phenomenon lasted for a long time. When all the aura dissipated, Bai Xiaoli's true body stood under the sky. Her eyes were cold, as if there was no emotion in them. Lin Yu felt that the current Bai Xiaoli was so unfamiliar. This was his original appearance. As one of the 10 great demon kings, he looked down on the entire world. Even the original ruler of a universe could only bow down before him. It was difficult for him to look up to them. As the most powerful existence in the world, the 9-tailed celestial fox, Bai Xiaoli, should be indifferent to all living beings in the world. As the aura of Bai Xiaoli's physical body gradually converged. At this moment, he summoned Lin Yu over. Now that you have broken through to the Lord God realm, your physical body is in the progenitor realm. If you want to break through quickly and be able to compete with the godly kings of the 10th universe, there's only one way to break through to the flawless progenitor realm. Bai Xiaoli had just escaped and was very weak. She needed to sleep for a long time. In the future, Lin Yu might not be able to help much in the war against the 10th universe. Therefore, he now told Lin Yu the way to break through quickly. Lin Yu nodded slightly. Indeed, the most important thing for him now was to raise his realm. The 12 universes had been weak for too long. If the 10th universe really attacked, he would not have the slightest strength to resist. Although he could protect himself, the 12 universes were the condensation of his father's life's work, as well as his friends and family. He would never choose to give up the entire 12 universes. Find the 10 monster kings and get their recognition. Gather 10 monster king marks, and you will truly break through to the flawless progenitor realm. Your future achievements will be limitless. Bai Xiaoli did not hide anything and said directly. Although this was a good way to break through quickly, the difficulty level was enough to give one a headache. This was because Lin Yu had already offended the 3 demon kings, Gu Hu, Turbid Immortal, and Yu Ming during the fight for the mysterious factor in the burial ground. The difficulty of obtaining their recognition was undoubtedly extremely great. It could be said that this was almost impossible. There's no such thing as an absolute enemy. Furthermore, these old fellows are on the verge of going insane from the torture of being sealed. I believe that you have the means to obtain their acknowledgement. Bai Xiaoli smiled and said. Now that he was free, he only needed a little time to return his peak. However, his friendship with Lin Yu had not changed. He was not an ungrateful person. I'll think of something. Lin Yu nodded. Now more than 100 years had passed, and it was getting more and more urgent. He believed that the godly king of the 10th universe had already gathered his forces and was ready to attack the 12th universe at any time. Besides Lin Yu, it would be difficult to find anyone else in the 12 cosmoses who could stand up to a god monarch powerhouse. One had to know that the 10th universe was extremely powerful and there was definitely more than one godly king powerhouse in it. And judging from the realm of the godly king of the 10th universe, he was definitely not at the overgod realm, but at an even higher level. Through the barrier of the universe, one's figure was reflected. It was probably difficult for an ordinary ancestor realm to achieve. This also made Lin Yu's mood a little heavy. However, he did not show any despair. His state of mind was very calm, and he did not panic in the face of danger. Lin Yu's temperament had always been calm. This was brought about by the 100,000 years of reincarnation. I'll be in a deep sleep soon. This is the key to the other sacred grounds. You can set off when you choose a day. Bai Xiaoli said. An ancient light ball appeared in Lin Yu's hand. This was the key to contact the 10 sacred grounds. At the same time, it was also the communication device of the 10 demon kings. The 10 great monster kings were originally one entity, created by the supreme creator of the world. They had a connection with each other. Now that Bai Xiaoli was free, they must have sensed it as well. This was also one of Lin Yu's opportunities. When the other demon kings sensed that Bai Xiaoli was free, they would definitely be anxious and hopeful. Only Lin Yu threw out an olive branch at the right time. She believed that some of the demon kings would choose to give a try, although the mark of the demon kings was equivalent to recognizing a master. This depended on Lin Yu's strength being higher than theirs. Even Bai Xiaoli did not believe that Lin Yu could surpass her one day. They had a clear understanding of their own realms. After the Creator, apart from a few first-generation godly kings, there were only a handful of people who could suppress them, and Lin Yu was just a rising star. Even if his talent and temperament were excellent, it was not that there were no such people in the entire universe and sacred grounds. But in the end, they were just the dust of history. After that, Bai Xiaoli's foxtail slowly touched Lin Yu's forehead, and a pure energy began to be injected. Lin Yu only felt that his understanding of the Tao of heaven and earth seemed to have become clearer. It was as if he was about to merge with the Tao and break through the last step. However, this aura came and went quickly. Lin Yu sighed. He had only obtained the mark of a demon king, but he already felt that he was about to break through to the ancestor realm. If the marks of the 10 demon kings were to combine, at that time, he would definitely be able to break through to the ancestor realm, and it would be a flawless one that could lead to the great Tao. Bai Xiaoli was very secretive about this matter. Then, under the wrapping of Bai Xiaoli's foxtail, when everyone opened their eyes, they had already returned to Heavenly Island. For an expert like Bai Xiaoli, space and time were just toys at her fingertips. All the mysterious teleportation arrays between heaven and earth were just small tricks in front of her. Everyone was shocked by Xiaoli's methods. However, after informing her of the matter, Bai Xiaoli went into seclusion. At least 1,000 years, at most 10,000 years, I will recover. At that time, I will lead all of you into the supreme realm and spend time with me. A majestic voice sounded, and Bai Xiaoli disappeared from the secret place. After all the aura calmed down, Lin Yu sensed the aura of the 10 Holy Land keys on his chest. He did not delay any longer, and after bidding farewell to everyone, he prepared to go on the path to obtain the marks of the 10 Holy Land demon kings alone. Are we leaving? Ancestor Lu slowly asked from the side. Lin Yu nodded. Senior, will you return to the first universe? Lin Yu went straight to the point. Ancestor Lu did not seem surprised that Lin Yu knew that he came from the first universe. Instead, he nodded and said, when the time is right, I will naturally return there. Who knows, we might meet again. Senior, you should know about Earth, right? Lin Yu said. In that case, we are from the same hometown. Ancestor Lu smiled. See you then. Lin Yu cupped his hands. However, Bai Yu's eyes were dim. Senior Lin Yu, will we meet again? Finally, Bai Yu mustered up her courage and stepped forward to ask. Her eyes were filled with hope. She was also afraid of hearing a rejection. When your old ancestor recovers, you can come to the 12 universes often to play. Lin Yu said. How could he not know what Bai Yu was thinking? It was just that he was not in the mood for romance. Chapter 1170. After bidding farewell to everyone, Lin Yu arrived at the border of the Ten Direction world. He took one last look at the Ten Direction world and stepped into the passageway opened by the key. The blue waves were boundless, and a gentle breeze blew. However, there were no signs of living beings here. Corpses could be seen floating in the water. Is this the Permitha Holy Land? Lin Yu looked around and said slowly. The 10 great holy lands had been reduced to ruins due to the great battle among the ancient corpses. Later, forces from other universes invaded and signed contracts with the 10 great demon kings in order to obtain their power. However, in the end, they went for wool and came home shorn. Instead, the 10 great demon kings wiped them out and established their own forces. As time passed, the living beings here gradually became more powerful due to the auras of the 10 great demon kings. They became the patriarchs of the forces here, and these forces became the biggest reason why the 10 great demon kings were able to escape. Countless years had passed. Bai Xiaoli's escape was largely due to the forces of the Ten Direction world. They had obtained the mysterious factor many times and weakened the seal. According to what the Heaven Burial Ground knew, there were no progenitor stage cultivators in the opposite shore realm. After all, the fight for the mysterious factor this time was very important. All the forces of the Holy Lands had sent out their most powerful forces. In the deepest part of the blue waves, there was a floating building. It was like a bridge that led to the other shore. This was also the origin of this holy land. And under this bridge was the seal of the Permitha Holy Land. Who are you? Lin Yu flew on his sword and soon arrived here. Below the mountain gate, someone blocked Lin Yu's path. Please inform the Holy Lord of the Permitha Holy Land that the human from the Ten Direction world requests an audience, Lin Yu replied calmly. The creature guarding the gate was puzzled. The 10 great holy lands are separated by a realm wall. It was impossible to reach them. However, the sudden appearance of a human outside the Permitha Holy Land made him a little suspicious. Lin Yu felt that this was troublesome. He sensed the human's aura. It directly caused the endless blue waves below to set off monstrous waves. Even the entire Permitha Holy Land was shaking, seemingly unstable. Who is it? This immediately alarmed the Holy Lord of the Permitha Holy Land. The experts of the Permitha Holy Ground were alarmed. Some of them came out of seclusion in advance and came to the mountain gate of the Permitha Holy Ground. Greetings, Holy Lord. Lin Yu cupped his hands. The old sacred leader of the Permitha Holy Land was stunned. Then he recalled the godlike figure in the sky burial ground. You? Which human from the 10 square world? The sacred leader of the Permitha sacred ground felt his scalp go numb. He was the godly exterminator who had not only killed the Netherworld and the ancient Flash factions at the beginning, he had even slain their old sacred leader in the deeper regions. As for the Permitha Holy Land, they didn't have any Ancestor Realm experts. If Lin Yu made a move here, it would be a massacre. Fortunately, we have the array formation left behind by the Patriarch. The Sacred Master of the Permitha Holy Land rejoiced. If they were to encounter this murderous god in the sky burial ground, their Permitha Holy Land would have no way of dealing with him. However, this was the Permitha Holy Land. They had the means to deal with him. Even if an Ancestor Realm expert came here, he would have to bear a grudge. If he has a request, we'll try our best to satisfy him. The sacred leader of the Permitha Holy Land thought. From the battles in the sky burial ground, he knew that Lin Yu was not a reckless person. Since he dared to come to the Permitha Holy Land alone, he must have a hidden trump card. I don't mean any harm. I'm just here to see your patriarch. Lin Yu said calmly. I can help him escape. The expression of the holy leader of the Other Shore Holy Land, as well as the group of legendary figures, changed drastically when they heard this. They knew that they were born so that their patriarch could escape. This was their mission, and it was also the goal that many generations had been striving for. Now, someone was saying that he could help their patriarch escape. This was undoubtedly a heavy bomb that exploded in everyone's heart. A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. Is what you said true? The sacred leader of the Permitha Holy Land felt his throat dry up. I think he's just boasting. Someone questioned, How terrifying is the Monster King's seal? Is it something a human can break just because he says so? Some people came to a realization. They all knew that the seal of the 10 great Monster Kings was extremely sturdy and immortal. How could a human who is only an overgod break it so easily? Shut up. The sacred leader of the Permitha Holy Land raised his eyebrows and scolded. He knew how terrifying Lin Yu's methods were. If they angered him, the Permitha Holy Land would not have an easy time. Moreover, this matter concerned the patriarch's escape. They could believe it, but they could not. They could try before questioning it. Everyone shut their mouths because of the sacred leader's scolding. If what you said is true, the Permitha Holy Land will pay any price. The sacred leader of the Permitha Holy Land said sternly. Based on his tone, it was obvious that the other sure sacred master wasn't joking. I need to discuss this with your patriarch. Lin Yu shook his head and said calmly, "Let him in." At this moment, an ancient voice resounded between heaven and earth. The voice was like rolling thunder, filled with endless pressure that made people want to kneel down. "We obey the orders of the patriarch." The people of the Permitha Holy Land all knelt on the ground. The sacred leader was surprised. He did not expect the patriarch to take the initiative to speak after Lin Yu's arrival. "Young friend, please come in." The sacred leader led the way personally. After stepping across the bridge, the two of them came to the bottom of the water. Beneath the surface of the water was a completely different world. There was no longer any water here, forming a vacuum. In the center was an ancient altar that was very similar to the one that's sealed by Xiaoli. It was not damaged or mottled by the passage of time. It still had an immortal aura. "You may leave." At this moment, the ancient voice came from below the altar again. "Yes." The sacred leader of the Permitha Holy Land bowed respectfully and left the space. "You have by Xiaoli's aura on you. You must be the one who helped her escape." The voice came from below the altar. Lin Yu did not hide anything and said, "Yes." "What is your purpose of coming here?" The ancient voice continued to ask. Lin Yu felt immense pressure. "You helped by Xiaoli get the mysterious factor, which is equivalent to stopping the other Monster Kings from escaping. Aren't you afraid that I will kill you? I need your Monster King seal." Lin Yu didn't hide anything and went straight to the point. "As a condition, I can help you get out of here for 10,000 years. Why should I believe a mere over-god ant like you?" "Because of this," Lin Yu said calmly in the face of the immense pressure. The aura of the God King seal was emitted from his body. This was what Bai Xiaoli told him. The other Monster Kings knew about the aura of the God King seal. "This is..." The Monster King of the Permitha Holy Land was obviously shocked. After pondering for a long time, "Let me think about it. I will give you an answer in 3 days." Chapter 1171. No problem. Lin Yu nodded. Then, Lin Yu turned around and left the altar. He came to the main hall. It was already full of people, all of whom were very nervous and excited. This time, Lin Yu's arrival had caused the patriarch to speak. They were all anxious, but at the same time, they were also hopeful. If Lin Yu really had the means to rescue the patriarch, then the situation of the entire 10 sacred lands and even the 12 universes would change. This kind of impact was very far-reaching. "Young friend, how is it?" The sacred land master was burning with anxiety. When he saw Lin Yu appear, he immediately went forward and asked, "Your patriarch needs 3 days to consider," Lin Yu said truthfully. Then, Lin Yu prepared to go to the outside world and said, "I'll stay in the Permitha sacred land and come here in 3 days." With that, Lin Yu walked out of the main hall. Now, no one dared to question Lin Yu. Their patriarch had personally summoned him, although no one knew what they said. However, if the patriarch needed 3 days to consider, then Lin Yu must have some means. After Lin Yu walked out of the main hall, he disappeared from the sacred land. He came to an unknown place in the Permitha sacred land and found a place where there was no one. He fished in this water area. Even if there were no fish, Lin Yu sat on the water surface, his state of mind calm. At this time, he did not show any cultivation. The more one cultivated, the more one needed to stabilize. This was not only in terms of power, but also in terms of state of mind. Lin Yu's state of mind at this time began to settle after the battle in the burial ground. The power of the ancient pot's sacred master was quickly digested in his body. At a certain point in time, it had completely merged with his cultivation. Now his Lord God realm was more and more solid, and he had reached the peak of the Lord God realm. He was only a step away from the half-step ancestor realm. What Lin Yu sought was absolutely not just as simple as breaking through to the ancestor realm. Therefore, he continued to refine the power of the old holy master of the ancient pot holy land, removing all of the impurities and leaving only the purest part behind. That was why his cultivation had only improved by a small step. This was also closely related to Lin Yu's own realm. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Lin Yu returned to the center of the Permitha Holy Land. With the Lord of the Holy Land leading the way, Lin Yu once again arrived at the altar where the Nirvana Monster King was sealed. "Have you thought it through?" Lin Yu asked indifferently. The two of them were in an exchange relationship and did not have much of a relationship. Furthermore, the 10 demon kings had been sealed for too long. They could no longer endure it. The altar was constantly wearing down their strength. That was also the reason why Bai Xiaoli entered closed-door training the moment she was freed. Even if she was freed, she would need a long time to recover to her peak. As for the other demon kings, if they were unable to break free, their strength would be completely devoured by the altar one day. In the end, they could only perish. I can promise you. However, how will you fulfill your promise? The Nirvana Monster King said slowly. He was still cautious. Seeing this, Lin Yu did not hesitate. I, the 12 deity kings of the universe, hereby swear to the heavenly Tao that if I do not help the Nirvana Monster King to break free after 10,000 years, my body and soul will be destroyed, and I will fall into the cycle of reincarnation forever. At that moment, there seemed to be shackles between heaven and earth that descended upon Lin Yu. Seeing that Lin Yu had made the heavenly Tao oath, the Nirvana Monster King nodded his head slowly. "Since you have this artifact, I will believe you this time. I hope Bai Xiaoli is not lying to me." The Nirvana Monster King sighed. A dense halo floated up from the altar. There seemed to be a mysterious power within, carrying some kind of Tao law. Under the light, one would feel comfortable all over. Looking at this power, there were signs of entering the Tao. One of the special imprints that belonged to the Nirvana Monster King was slowly absorbed by Lin Yu. In Lin Yu's sea of consciousness, a second demon king's imprint appeared. At that moment, his body was filled with Tao law. He was like the only god in heaven and earth, accompanying the great Tao. It was very sacred. "You will not be disappointed," Lin Yu said calmly. "I hope so." With that, the Nirvana Monster King revealed his slumber. After obtaining the Nirvana Monster King's imprint, Lin Yu did not stay any longer. Instead, he went to the border of the Nirvana Sanctuary and opened the boundary wall with the key. The entire world of the Bitter Sea sacred ground was barren. On the ground, there were traces of dried spring water. The water source here had disappeared for an unknown period of time. What surprised Lin Yu was that after years of precipitation, some kind of strange life form seemed to have been born here. This life form was in a wandering state. Its body flickered with a strange phosphorescence that could penetrate one's body and directly harm the sea of consciousness. However, this life form seemed to have no intelligence. It just floated aimlessly on the barren land of the Misery Sea Sanctuary. They were devouring each other. Lin Yu gradually went deeper. The life forms here had become very powerful because of devouring. Some of the life forms entrenched in the terrain could even vaguely pose a threat to Lin Yu. This was a bad omen. Lin Yu did not know how many more of these life forms there were in the depths. The key that Bai Xiaoli gave him could only open the boundary wall. As for the place to reach the sanctuary, it did not have the exact location. The life forms here seemed to have gone through a great war in a certain era. They were born through the special nurturing of this place. They were very old. Powerful life forms already possessed simple intelligence, and they also had very strong offensive capabilities. As long as they appeared in his territory, they would be devoured. Lin Yu bypassed the territories of some powerful life forms. It was just that some were unavoidable. Lin Yu could only passively kill them. After killing the strange life forms, it was as if he had poked a beehive. The life forms here became incomparably violent. It let out a sharp roar and pounced on Lin Yu. They seemed to want to gnaw his body to nothing and kept drilling into his sea of consciousness. Lin Yu's body emitted a bright luster and repelled some strange life forms. However, there were too many of these life forms in this area. It was difficult to estimate them with the naked eye. Moreover, divine abilities and spells seemed to be unable to cause any substantial effect on them. Lin Yu's Emperor's sword appeared in his hand. He swung the sword. A large number of life forms were directly split into two halves. However, they quickly recovered. It was difficult to kill them completely. Even Lin Yu was in a bitter battle. Clang! The Emperor's sword cut through the ground. At this moment, in the direction of the sword mark, many life forms were destroyed and did not seem to be recovering. So that's how it is. Lin Yu suddenly understood. These life forms were immune to divine abilities and physical methods. However, they were only afraid of sound. Lin Yu stabbed the Emperor's sword into the ground diagonally, and a bamboo flute appeared in his hand. Mahu Jia, one of the great Void 8 tribes, used a unique rhythm that caused all the living beings in the area to scream in agony as they were destroyed continuously. Chapter 1172. The sound of the flute was distant and passionate at the same time. It was only when all life forms were destroyed that the world returned to silence. Lin Yu put away his flute. He looked into the distance. There was a bronze palace in front of him. It stood under the sky and emitted a faint luster, as if all the light that shone on it was absorbed and devoured. Is this also the Bitter Sea Monster King's method of escaping? Lin Yu guessed. The 10 Monster Kings would not just sit and wait for death in the face of the seal. Instead, they had set up some methods over the years. For example, Bai Shaoling not only borrowed some factors, but also accumulated a large amount of wish power. Although the effect was minimal, as long as one did not die after countless years, they would be able to escape one day through their own methods. Lin Yu approached the Bronze Palace. Many people had already appeared in front of the Bronze Palace. Among them were the Holy Lord of the Bitter Sea, Sacred Ground, and the others. Seeing Lin Yu arrive, the Holy Lord of the Bitter Sea, Sacred Ground said slowly, "Ancestor has been waiting for you for a long time." Lin Yu was not surprised. The Nirvana Monster King must have sent a message to the Bitter Sea Monster King. He followed the Holy Lord of the Bitter Sea, Sacred Ground into the Bronze Palace. The altar in the depths was emitting a black light. The Bitter Sea Monster King's aura was overflowing. He seemed to have worn down the seal of the altar more than the Nirvana Monster King. However, the overall effect was minimal. "Young human, you're here." A hoarse voice came from below the altar. "I've heard about you from a Nirvana monster," the Bitter Sea Monster King said slowly. Bitter Sea Monster King said slowly, "I can give you the mark, but you have to answer a question of mine." "No problem. In exchange, you have to answer a question of mine," Lin Yu replied calmly. There were too many mysteries surrounding the 10 great monster kings. Lin Yu hoped to learn about the origin of the world from them. The Bitter Sea Monster King was stunned when he heard Lin Yu's reply. However, he immediately smiled and said, "You're not bad to be chosen by Xiaoli. You have guts." "So you agree?" Lin Yu asked. "It's just a question." "Go ahead," said Bitter Sea Demon King. His voice was extremely hoarse. However, the pressure that was contained within it made people feel an immense pressure. It was as if they were facing a vast expanse of heaven. "Who was your opponent in that battle?" Lin Yu asked directly. Bitter Sea Demon King was silent for a long time. "Creator." These 3 simple words seemed to carry a huge magical power. Even with Lin Yu's mental fortitude, which surpassed that of ordinary people, he couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. A chill ran down his spine. Back then, the opponent of the 10 Demon Kings was the creator of this universe and Holy Land. He was the most powerful being. Even the 10 great monster kings were created by him. Why did the 10 great monster kings attack him in the end? All of this was unknowable. There must be figures from the 12 universes among them. It wasn't hard to guess that the origin god kings of the 12 universes were definitely involved. However, why did they attack their creator? There were too many secrets hidden within. It was definitely not something that could be explained in a few words. Lin Yu knew this very well. His current question was purely to satisfy his inner curiosity. The secret of the origin had troubled him for too long. However, Bai Xiaoli didn't say anything about it. As Lin Yu understood bit by bit, he felt increasingly terrified. He also didn't know the outcome of the battle. He only knew that the 10 great monster kings were sealed in the end, and the origin god kings disappeared without a trace. It was difficult to track them down. One had to know that the origin god kings were definitely above the progenitor realm. They were immortal and indestructible. It was difficult for the heavens to bury them and the earth to overturn them. The outcome of that battle was unknown. I've answered your question. Bitter Sea Demon King pulled Lin Yu back to reality. What do you want to know? Lin Yu asked calmly. How did you get the thing in your body? Bitter Sea Demon King went straight to the point. I inherited it from my father. In the 12 universes, it's called the God King's Badge. Lin Yu answered truthfully. At the same time, he also wanted to know what it was that could move the 10 great monster kings and where it came from. The God King's Badge? It's not wrong to call it that. Bitter Sea Demon King said. Lin Yu's understanding of the God King's Badge was very limited. His answer didn't have any substantial effect. Bitter Sea Demon King didn't care either. As long as this item still existed in the world and was used appropriately, the 10 great monster kings still had a great chance of escaping. It's a pity that it has already recognized its master. Otherwise, I would be able to escape with this item. Bitter Sea Demon King said regretfully. As he spoke, a gentle beam of light shone towards Lin Yu. He didn't dodge. It was Bitter Sea Demon King's mark. At this point, Lin Yu didn't encounter any obstacles. He had already obtained the marks of Bai Xiaoli, Bitter Sea Demon King, and Nirvana Demon King. Vast power entered Lin Yu's body. The marks of the 10 great monster kings seemed to carry the great Tao. At this moment, Lin Yu's cultivation was actually increasing. Bitter Sea Demon King's mark slowly entered his sea of consciousness. Lin Yu's realm had also broken through to the half-step ancestor realm. However, to truly break through to the ancestor realm, even though Lin Yu had comprehended the ancestor realm Tao law in the sage realm, it was still extremely difficult. Breaking through to the ancestor realm required a great opportunity. This was no longer a step that could be achieved by ordinary creation and power. It took Lin Yu half a year to accept the Bitter Sea Demon King's imprint. As the number of Monster King's marks in his sea of consciousness increased, Lin Yu felt that his sea of consciousness couldn't contain the vast power of Tao law and could explode at any time. Although the 10 great Monster Kings came from the same source, the power between them was too great and there would be rejection. Bitter Sea Demon King, Nirvana Demon King, and Bai Xiaoli didn't reject each other. As time went on, the situation would definitely worsen. There was a great danger in it. Because Lin Yu's realm was low, the danger would be magnified infinitely. Even Bitter Sea Demon King was a little doubtful. Putting everything else aside, Lin Yu seemed to be able to safely absorb and combine the marks of the 10 great monster kings. This would be a huge problem. After a long time, Lin Yu slowly opened his eyes. He had completely stabilized the marks of the 3 monster kings, but he didn't know if the next step would break the balance. Thank you. Lin Yu thanked him. Then, he left the Bitter Sea sacred ground. Under Lin Yu's flute music, the strange life forms automatically opened a path for him. Lin Yu was unimpeded all the way to the edge of the Bitter Sea sacred ground. Looking at the chaotic qi surrounding him, Lin Yu opened the key and a passage appeared in front of him. Chapter 1173. The Green Wave realm was filled with ancient trees that were close to decaying. In the center, there was a huge, ancient tree that soared into the sky. But now, only the driving force remained. The brown tree trunk still had some kind of mysterious Tao law and seemed to be full of vitality. The 10 great sacred lands had become a place of extinction because of the Great War. There was no trace of life. Lin Yu slowly approached. He walked on the desolate land, like a lone traveler after the end of the world. He was alone, and there was no one around to accompany him. As time passed, Lin Yu got closer to the location of the decaying tree. The power of the Qinglan sacred ground was on this ancient tree. Many palaces could be seen standing on top of it. Flat lands had been carved out on top of the ancient trees. It was obvious how majestic this tree was and could not be measured by common sense. At this time, there was already someone waiting for a long time under the ancient tree. "You're here." The old sacred lord of the Qinglan sacred ground was also an ancestor realm expert. Time had left an indelible mark on his body. His aura was very strong and gave people a feeling of unfathomable. Lin Yu even felt that the old sacred lord of the Qinglan sacred ground was stronger than the old sacred lords of the Netherworld and Ancient Pot. But after the battle in the depths of the burial place, he knew that the power of the Ten Direction realm was not something he could fight alone. Therefore, he withdrew early to preserve the power of the Qinglan sacred ground to the greatest extent. "Greetings, old sacred lord of the Qinglan sacred ground." Lin Yu cupped his hands politely. Out of courtesy, Lin Yu's attitude, even in the face of an ancestor realm expert, was not the slightest bit humble. His position was the divine king of the 12 universes, the ruler of a universe. In terms of status, he would never fall below the old sacred lord of the sacred ground. "The ancestor wants you to come in and talk," the old sacred lord of the Qinglan sacred ground said. After returning to the Qinglan sacred ground, the old sacred lord of the Qinglan sacred ground had already gone into seclusion. But because Lin Yu traveled to the 10 great sacred grounds, all the monster kings had received the news because of Baishali's message. Now, in the 10 great sacred grounds, everyone had come out of seclusion, ready to face the great changes. Lin Yu had promised to free the Demon King 10,000 years later. It sounded like a long time, but in the eyes of the 10 great Fey kings, 100,000 years was just the blink of an eye. 100,000 years of waiting. Many demon kings were willing to give it a try. Azure Wave was also willing to take the gamble. This was because the King of God's badge in Lin Yu's hands gave them a glimmer of hope. As long as Lin Yu was strong enough, he would be able to go up. With the King of God's order, he could break the seal and rescue them. Regarding this point, the Green Wave Monster King could accept the olive branch that Lin Yu threw out. "How did you reach the Ancestor Realm in just 100,000 years?" The Green Billow Monster King asked doubtfully. In the later stages of cultivation, time could easily be counted in millions of years for an expert. It was likely that he would remain stagnant for the rest of his life. After the Divine King Realm, one's cultivation level could no longer be accumulated with time. It required talent, a Tao heart, and luck. You can give it a try. Lin Yu had an absolute disposition towards his own talent and Tao heart. After 100,000 years of tempering, Lin Yu's disposition was already indestructible, and nothing could move him. In terms of talent, although Lin Yu did not dare to say that he was the only one throughout the ages, but he was definitely an existence that was hard to come by in an era. As for luck and talent, I am now snatching them from you, Lin Yu said. The Green Wave Monster King was taken aback when he heard that. "You are right, you are very bold. But there are some things that I need to verify, personally, to see if you really have the qualifications," he said slowly. Lin Yu did not show the slightest bit of emotion towards the doubt. The green light here began to surge, and gradually the environment around the altar began to slowly change. Until a certain moment, Lin Yu seemed to have been placed in another world. The ancient trees here were jagged, with twisted roots and intertwined joints. The medicinal herbs were lush, and one could see living beings wandering all over the place. It was a scene of peace and tranquility. One could vaguely recognize that Lin Yu was now in the time before the Green Wave sacred ground was destroyed. This was a fertile land for living beings. One could see many rare and exotic beasts from ancient history, and creation was everywhere. The density of the Yao Qi was also astounding. It had already turned into a dense mist that floated in the forest. Lin Yu stood in the distance, looking at everything around him with a calm expression. This was the Green Wave Monster King's test for him. However, Lin Yu did not know where this test came from. It was better to wait and see. Lin Yu sat cross-legged on the ground, feeling the primitive Tao laws here. Time passed, and he did not know how much time had passed. At this moment, a cry came from the forest in the distance. "Save me! Someone save me!" The voice was weak and hopeless. Lin Yu slowly opened his eyes. In front of him, there was a little girl with antlers on her head who was constantly crying for help. Behind her, there were a few jackals, wolves, tigers, and leopards with bloodthirsty eyes. It was obvious that they were starving. The deer girl's hands and feet were bleeding, and her face was pale. She could be chased at any time. Lin Yu looked at this scene calmly. The deer girl's big, watery eyes were full of panic and despair, and she was about to give up struggling. However, at this moment, she saw Lin Yu sitting cross-legged in the forest. It was as if she was grabbing at the last straw. She quickly approached Lin Yu. She kept murmuring, "Save me, big brother." The jackals and wolves were already pouncing on the deer girl. Lin Yu sighed softly, and with a wave of his hand, endless power was released. Immediately, the jackals and wolves at the back staggered, swaying left and right before finally falling to the ground. They howled and ran into the depths of the forest. This seems to be another karma. Lin Yu looked at the little deer girl who was hiding behind him and panicking at the moment. The weak balance in the forest seemed to have been broken now. Outside the illusion, the Green Wave Demon King under the altar began to sigh at this time. Is he going to fail after all? It seems that my expectations of him are still too high. At this moment in the outside world, it seemed that a few years had passed in the illusion. Because Lin Yu saved the deer girl, the balance in the primitive boundary of the Qinglan's sacred ground seemed to have been broken. It was like a butterfly flapping its wings in an unknown area, but it would trigger a vast natural disaster. At this time, the entire primitive boundary of the Qinglan's sacred ground had been enveloped in fire. Lin Yu stood in the monstrous fire. It seemed to be irreversible. At the very beginning, Lin Yu had already realized that saving the deer girl was likely to bring about great karma. Sure enough, at this time, the karma was revealed. Because the jackals and wolves did not eat, it triggered a series of unforeseen events, making the entire forest show signs of doomsday. Although Lin Yu knew it, he still did it, which proved that he was not afraid of such karma. As long as I'm strong enough, what is there to be afraid of even if all kinds of karma affect me? Lin Yu opened his eyes, and at this time, his figure appeared in the sky. With a wave of his hand, the monstrous fire in the forest was all extinguished. The deer girl who had died in the fire, at this time, also revived under the power of Lin Yu's Divine King's token to reverse time. Everything here had returned to its former state of prosperity, tranquility, and peace. The illusion here was gradually broken. The Green Wave Demon King never thought that Lin Yu would break the illusion with this, which was completely beyond his expectations. "You're really different from what I thought." The Green Wave Demon King could not help but sigh. He suddenly realized that Lin Yu's future achievements may be greater than what the other Demon Kings had expected. Even the Green Wave Demon King was moved by Yi Qingyu's imposing manner. Chapter 1174. Although this had already deviated from the original intention of the Green Wave Demon King's trial, but what Lin Yu did this time was not wrong. On the contrary, it was very reasonable. As long as one was strong enough, all the shackles and rules of the world could naturally be broken. This was a principle that had never changed since time immemorial. But what the Green Wave Demon King did not expect was that although Lin Yu looked delicate and pretty, his actions were filled with a domineering aura. There was an invincible belief in his heart that made one feel surprised, and even a sense of awe rose in one's heart. "Do you think the trial is over?" Lin Yu opened his eyes in reality and slowly opened his mouth to ask. The Green Wave Demon King pondered for a moment. "The trial is over. Naturally, there is no problem. the green wave demon king said. At this moment, a green beam of light shot out from the altar where the green wave demon king was sealed. This was the mark of the green wave demon king, which represented that the current green wave demon king had officially acknowledged Lin Yu. But now, in the process of accepting the mark, there was a problem. Because in Lin Yu's sea of consciousness at this moment, there were already 3 marks of the demon king. And with Lin Yu's current cultivation and realm, it was very difficult for him to completely bear the power of the green wave demon king. At this moment, in Lin Yu's sea of consciousness, there were already cracks that were difficult to mend, and the trend of decline was almost irreversible. This made the green wave demon king's expression change when he saw this scene. He had always neglected Lin Yu's current realm. He did not consider whether the current Lin Yu could bear this power. Lin Yu was now under great pressure. Not only his consciousness, but even his physical body, under the impact of this powerful force, was like a small boat in a storm and could disintegrate at any time. This was within Lin Yu's expectations. But even if he was prepared, under the impact of these marks of the Demon King, he still seemed so powerless. Lin Yu was in a deadlock, and if he did not handle it well, he might really die. It's just the mark of a Demon King. How can I be controlled by it? Lin Yu's voice rang out in his heart. At this moment, his body was overflowing with dense radiance. It was very mysterious. At this moment, his Dao Law appeared around him. Currently, his cultivation realm seemed to have already begun striding towards the Ancestor realm and could break through at any time. Only an Ancestor realm cultivation could withstand this power. However, this was not what Lin Yu wanted. If he wanted to break through to the unblemished progenitor realm, then he had to combine the imprints of all the Demon Kings. Lin Yu's goal was absolutely not as simple as breaking through to the Ancestor realm. After what he had seen and heard today, he already knew that even the Ancestor realm cultivation was not the end of a universe's ruler. According to Bai Xiaoli, there was going to be an earth-shattering commotion soon after. At that time, Ancestor realms could only be reduced to cannon fodder. If he wanted the 12 universes to have a foothold in this turmoil, Lin Yu had to improve his cultivation again. He knew that he had the ability to face the turmoil alone. At this moment, Lin Yu directly suppressed his cultivation again, until he returned to the half-step Ancestor realm. However, Lin Yu also paid a heavy price for forcefully obstructing the process of breaking through. At this moment, his entire body was already cracked. Even his consciousness could no longer restrain the imprints of the 4 Demon Kings. It seemed that they could rush out of his consciousness at any time. At that time, all his efforts would be reduced to nothing. Even Lin Yu would fall in this. The 10 Demon Kings were experts who had surpassed the Ancestor realm. In the entire world, they were top existences, even if it was just a mark. This represented the condensation of the Tao laws of the 10 Demon Kings. The terrifying power that was nurtured within was enough to destroy any living being. Just a mark, without spending a long time to comprehend and refine, could threaten one's life. However, Lin Yu did not have so much time to waste. After Lin Yu suppressed his realm, his consciousness took the form of a small person and appeared in his sea of consciousness. A boundless storm was forming in Lin Yu's consciousness. The imprints of the 4 Demon Kings were clashing with each other. Although the 4 Demon Kings' power came from the same source, they were not very compatible with each other. In an extremely long time ago, the 10 Demon Kings had once fought a great battle. This was also why the 10-direction world was suppressed by the 3 sacred grounds, Ancient Pot, Netherworld, and Turbid Immortal. Most of the reasons were because of this. In an extremely long time ago, the 3 Demon Kings, Ancient Pot, Turbid Immortal, and Netherworld had suffered in the hands of Bai Xiaoli. As a result, the hatred and humiliation had been passed down in their bloodlines. However, this was not a problem that Lin Yu should be thinking about now. He needed to solve the problem in his body and balance the imprints of the 4 Demon Kings. The 10 Demon Kings each had their own strengths and characteristics. For example, Bai Xiaoli's divine thought was much stronger than the other Demon Kings. This was the reason why his divine thought was the first to break free. Maybe I can use Bai Xiaoli's imprint to balance the imprints of the other demon kings. Lin Yu thought. Bai Xiaoli had once resided in his body and had a close connection with his divine thought. Therefore, Lin Yu was most familiar with Bai Xiaoli's aura. It was also the reason why he did not reject Bai Xiaoli's imprint. Lin Yu could also use Bai Xiaoli's imprint to balance the imprints of the other demon kings with his powerful divine thought. The white mystical imprint in Lin Yu's consciousness slowly appeared at the center. Under the control of Lin Yu's mind, Bai Xiaoli's imprint extended countless thin threads like chains and entangled the imprints of Blue Wave, Higan, and Bitter Sea Demon King. The thin threads formed a mystical barrier that connected all the imprints together and began to balance the violent power of the other Demon King's imprints. The power of the imprint had a lot to do with the Demon King's personality. Just like Bitter Sea Demon King, it was easy to balance the imprint, but when it came to Higan Demon King's imprint, it became difficult. It had a strong repulsive nature. As time went by, the repulsive nature continued to intensify. However, Lin Yu could sense that he was on the right track. After 20 years, Lin Yu finally calmed the Higan Demon King's imprint in his consciousness. Then, it was Blue Wave Demon King's imprint. The imprint was the condensation of the Tao of the 10 great Demon Kings. Once it was released, it could no longer be controlled by the Demon Kings. It was equivalent to recognizing a master, but the master's strength had to be at least on par with the Demon King. Therefore, even if Blue Wave Demon King was beside Lin Yu, he could not help much. It was also equivalent to a trial. If Lin Yu could not even survive such a trial, there was no need for him to continue moving forward. He had already lost the right to obtain the Demon King's imprint. Blue Wave Demon King did not sleep, but stared at Lin Yu indifferently. If Lin Yu died, it would cause a certain amount of damage to the Demon King who had entrusted the imprint to him. However, instead of dying halfway, it was better to have the results earlier and come faster. Time went by step by step. 30 years passed in a flash. The situation in Lin Yu's consciousness was developing in a good direction. At this moment, his consciousness had regained its calmness and was no longer as violent. The cracks in it were gradually mending under the power of Bai Xiaoli's imprint, gradually showing its immortality. Chapter 1175. Until a certain moment, Lin Yu slowly opened his eyes. At this time, he had completely balanced the mark of the Green Wave Demon King. Now, with Bai Xiaoli's mark as the foundation, a mysterious formation was constructed in his sea of consciousness. The primitive runes on it were intertwined. The marks of the Green Wave, Higan, and Bitter Sea Demon King circled around Bai Xiaoli's mark in a certain pattern. The remaining 5 positions of the formation were specially prepared for the remaining 5 Demon King marks. After doing all this, Lin Yu had also completely resolved the hidden danger in his sea of consciousness. As a result, it would be much easier to subdue the Demon King marks later on. Successfully resolved the hidden danger? The Green Wave Demon King's tone at this time revealed a slight surprise. He originally thought that Lin Yu would need a longer period of time. He did not expect that in just over 70 years, he had balanced the marks of the Demon Kings. At this time, Lin Yu's realm was even more solid. Although he was in the Overgod realm, he gave off the feeling that he was much stronger than ordinary half-step progenitor realm. Even some ordinary progenitor realm experts might not be a match for Lin Yu now. With the support of the 4 Demon King marks, his control of Tao had surpassed ordinary progenitor realm cultivators. It was extremely terrifying in a fight. The Demon King marks could increase one's combat strength by several times. Now, Lin Yu's strength was immeasurable. If it was in the burial of heavens before, Guhu and the old Holy Lord Netherworld would definitely not be able to do anything. Even if they were not injured, Lin Yu would not be able to defeat them without using the unifying chi of universe. Lin Yu got up. It was just a fluke. After obtaining the mark of the Green Wave Demon King, Lin Yu slowly walked out of the sacred ground under the gazes of the people of the Green Wave Sacred Ground. In just a short span of 100 years, This lad of the human race has already become increasingly unpredictable. Old Holy Master Greenwave lamented. The moment Lin Yu came out, he had already sensed it. If it was at Heaven Burial, old Saint Master Qinglong would be able to suppress him. But now, facing Lin Yu, as a cultivator who had broken through to the ancestor realm many years ago, he actually felt unfathomable and invincible in his heart. Is he really that powerful? Holy Lord Qinglong stood respectfully behind old Holy Lord Qinglong with a doubtful look in his eyes. Ancestor realm and Divine King realm were separated by a natural chasm. However, Lin Yu's appearance had broken this inherent seriousness. Old Holy Leader nodded. I'm afraid that in the near future, we'll hear of his name in the entire universe and holy lands. At this time, Lin Yu had already disappeared from the edge of the Qinglong sacred ground while riding the Emperor's sword. Is this your method? Lin Yu sneered disdainfully. His figure suddenly disappeared. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived outside the main hall. When he was outside the palace, he had already been on guard. And through the conversation with the Demon King of Wangxian just now, he was already certain. In order to fight for the mysterious factor of the burial place of heaven, the Demon King would never let his forces choose to sacrifice all of them. You've been trapped and sealed for too long. Your brain isn't very bright anymore, Lin Yu said faintly. Outside the palace, he had already set up a falsified heaven mark. With a single thought, he could leave. At this time, the living beings of the Wangxian sacred ground were all revealed. They had been hiding in the dark, in case of an emergency. You can't leave today. The old sacred lord of the Wangxian sacred ground was a skeleton that was close to decay. In his eyes, there was a faint phosphorescence. The aura and pressure of the ancestor realm were fully displayed. The Demon King of Wangxian had already begun to weaken, so the means he left behind could only cover the entire palace. As for the outside world, it was no longer of any use. Lin Yu's intelligence was close to that of a demon. Otherwise, he might have been caught off guard and suffered a calamity. But with his current strength, as long as there was no Demon King, he could already be considered an invincible existence among the 10 sacred grounds. With a wave of his hand, Lin Yu sealed the passage leading to the palace. Then, today, I'll return the words. None of you can leave, Lin Yu said calmly. You're just a puny master god. How dare you say such big words? The old sacred lord of Wangxian said with disdain. The rest of the people of the Wangxian sacred ground also seemed to have heard a joke. Do you think you could be presumptuous here just because you killed 2 injured ancestor realm experts? The sacred lord of Wangxian said. This was the main battlefield of the Wangxian sacred ground. For these skeletons who had turned into spirits, it had an incomparable boost. In their opinion, even if Lin Yu had the power of an ancestor realm expert, he could only nurse a grievance here and could not stir up any waves. Your thoughts are very stupid. Lin Yu only responded indifferently. Then he attacked. A terrifying power descended like a heavenly river. Chapter 1176. Lin Yu's figure stood tall under the sky, sending chills down one's spine. With a swing of his sword, the entire palace shook. At this moment, old sacred master Wangxian's expression changed greatly. This power made his scalp tingle. He actually felt a sense of invincibility. Boom! Countless bones formed a huge sword and slashed towards Lin Yu's sword light. The power was leaking out. One could see that the white bone sword was cracking inch by inch. It was just a moment of contact. Old sacred lord Wangxian's move was easily broken by Lin Yu. Lin Yu's momentum did not diminish. He took a step forward with the Emperor's sword in his hand. Everyone felt their scalp tingle. This guy was so terrifying. He was only an overgod, but his aura overwhelmed old sacred Lord Wangxian. Since you want to kill me and take my treasure, let's see if you have the strength to do so. Lin Yu's expression did not change. Then, there was another swing of his sword. Old sacred Lord Wangxian blocked it with his mystique. The white bones were all shattered. Under Lin Yu's sword light, they turned into dust and dissipated. Puff! Old sacred Lord Wangxian immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. Blood dripped and dyed the white bones red. The people of Wangxian's sacred ground hurriedly supported the old sacred lord. The huge impact made all of them take a few steps back. One person suppressed an entire sacred ground. Lin Yu stood under the sky. He was now the symbol of invincibility. It was enough to suppress everyone. Old Sacred Lord Wangxian said in disbelief, "It's only been 100 years. You haven't broken through. How are you so strong?" Lin Yu's battle record in Burial Heaven was obvious to all. Although he was strong, he was definitely not a match for a real progenitor. There are many things that you can't imagine. Lin Yu only replied indifferently. He struck again. The sword light in his hand was blazing. It almost pierced through the entire Wangxian sacred ground. How could the Wangxian lineage be weaker than humans? Human tribe rat, you are too arrogant. The old sacred master was furious at Lin Yu's one-sided suppression. Once again, he condensed his divine ability. The endless white bones outside the Wangxian sacred ground began to gather. In a short period of time, they had turned into a huge human skeleton. As the Wangxian sacred master formed a hand seal, meridians gradually appeared on the skeleton. Flesh and blood were also born at this moment. White bones roared and swatted towards Lin Yu. The entire ground began to shatter, and under the powerful force of white bones, an extremely deep gorge was formed. Countless bones fell from the sky. Lin Yu did not dodge. He used the 8 great void sects, and Azura's shadow appeared. Similarly, he extended his palm and blocked Baigu's advance. Lin Yu took a step forward and charged towards the old holy master and the others. The biting cold aura was filled with killing intent. It was like a strong wind in the cold winter of March, causing people to feel cold all over. They were all retreating uncontrollably. Lin Yu's momentum did not diminish, and the Emperor's sword carried a blazing light. It made it so that the people here could barely open their eyes. The phosphorescence in their pupils that represented their souls was about to be extinguished. The people of the Wangxian sacred ground formed a large formation, wanting to use it to resist Lin Yu's forceful footsteps. However, under the current power of Lin Yu, everything was useless. He has already refined the marks of the 4 demon kings. Juniors, be careful. Wangxian Demon King, who was below the altar in the main hall, reminded them at this moment. But now, as long as the original body of Wangxian Demon King did not appear, no one in the Wangxian sacred ground was a match for Lin Yu. So you improved so quickly in 100 years because you borrowed the power of the Demon King's marks. The old sacred master understood, but he was secretly complaining in his heart. Now, even if we know the source of his power, there is no way to counteract it. Is the Wangxian sacred ground going to be destroyed today, like the Nether Immortal, Turbid Immortal, and Ancient Flask? The sacred master was already in despair. The large formation they had formed was also shattering like a mirror. Don't say such discouraging words, the old sacred master scolded. But now his forehead was oozing with cold sweat. In order to resist Lin Yu's attack, he was also under great pressure. It was almost impossible to resist. Patriarch, let's surrender, someone had already said in despair. This killing god, do you think you can live if you surrender? The sacred master had seen Lin use terrifying means in the burial ground. He had casually slaughtered people from a sacred ground, and in the end, directly absorbed the power of an ancestor realm expert. The old sacred master's scalp went numb. He wanted nothing more than to directly kill the person who said that because now, in his heart, the idea of surrendering had also appeared. But now, it seemed that surrendering was no longer possible. Puff! Several people exploded into blood mist under the aftershock of Lin Yu's sword light. And this was only the beginning. Not long after, under the aftershock of the aftershock, the people from the Wangxian sacred ground were destroyed in body and soul. The white bones were turned into powder, and they didn't even have time to scream. The forces of the Wangxian sacred ground no longer need to exist in the world. Lin Yu's words were understated, as if the survival of the entire sacred ground had been decided. Wait, The Wangxian Demon King shouted, wanting to stop Lin Yu's next attack. Looking at Lin Yu's unparalleled means. At this moment, the huge white bone puppet was also directly torn apart by the Azura shadow and turned into several pieces. Lin Yu turned a deaf ear to this, as if he had already made up his mind to kill. Chi, the sword light cut through the void. It reached thousands of feet. Puff! The formation was directly broken. At this time, the old sacred master was coughing up large mouthfuls of blood. Although they were born of white bones, and their blood was essence, every drop of blood was incomparably precious to them, and was the condensation of their cultivation. Half of the white bone creatures of the Wangxian sacred ground had already died under this sword. The old sacred master was injured and almost had no strength to fight anymore. I apologize for what happened just now. I'm willing to take out the Demon King's mark. The people of the Wangxian sacred ground were still of great use to the Wangxian Demon King. He absolutely couldn't watch them die in front of him. Lin Yu only glanced at the main hall slightly. Then, he came in front of the old sacred master. The emperor's sword was pointed diagonally, and it was less than 3 inches away from his throat. The power on it could destroy his body and soul at any time, and he would die just like that. One could feel that the Wangxian Demon King seemed to have panicked. Lin Yu was too calm, as if he had already seen through his thoughts. Sigh. The Wangxian Demon King sighed. A translucent white light, with a mysterious aura, slowly flew out of the main hall. The Wangxian Demon King handed over his mark. But now, more than half of the Wangxian sacred ground had been killed or injured. For him, it was already a huge loss. Lin Yu absorbed the Wangxian Demon King's mark. Only then did he put away the Emperor's sword. He closed his eyes slightly, and the mark appeared in an empty space built by the array formation in his sea of consciousness. You don't have to do this. Lin Yu only said a sentence indifferently. Then he left this place. The Wangxian Demon King was left with black lines on his face. This time, he had really gone for wool and come home shorn. He had underestimated Lin Yu's shrewdness. This human's mind is close to that of a demon. Even I can't figure it out. Today, the Wangxian sacred ground has fallen. The Wangxian Demon King sighed. Then, he fell into a deep sleep. After being suppressed for so long, he was already very weak. He needed to spend a lot of time sleeping and recuperating. Chapter 1177. After Lin Yu obtained the imprint of the Demon King, immediately after, he headed to the next sanctuary, the Remnant Spirit Sanctuary. This place was already barren. One could only see the remains of many creatures that had already died. Their bodies were covered in armor, and they were walking in a specific direction. The collapsed ancient path was filled with the remains of these creatures. The scenes in the 10 great sanctuaries were different because of the Demon King's Tao Law. Lin Yu followed the ancient road and headed towards the end. At the end of the sky, there was a huge shadow. It had a green face and fangs, looking very ferocious. However, even though it was just a shadow, its body still exuded a heart-palpitating pressure. It was as if one's soul was about to fall under this shadow and be sacrificed. Lin Yu used his cultivation to resist the incoming power. This was the appearance of the Remnant Spirit Demon King. At this moment, he could already reveal a shadow. However, there was still a long time before he could escape. Are you the one who has that item? The shadow spoke. Yes. Lin Yu nodded. The Demon King's imprint appeared on the forehead of the shadow. If you want it, come and get it. The Remnant Spirit Demon King went straight to the point. Lin Yu looked up. Without any hesitation, the Emperor's sword appeared under his feet. He immediately rode on the sword and went up to the sky. Just as Lin Yu was about to touch the imprint, suddenly, a terrifying power poured down like the Milky Way. It was accompanied by the screams of countless creatures. It was very mournful. All of this was beyond Lin Yu's expectations. This power seemed to have surpassed the power of the Ancestor Realm. It was boundless and made one feel hopeless. Lin Yu used all of his techniques, just as he was about to use the chi of heaven and earth. This power wrapped Lin Yu's body and gradually became gentle. The purest energy was injected into Lin Yu's body. This was the accumulation of these remnant spirits over hundreds of millions of years. At this time, all of them had appeared in Lin Yu's sea of consciousness. The most basic source of power almost didn't need to be refined. It directly entered Lin Yu's sea of consciousness. This surprised Lin Yu. The remnant spirit fiend monarch was actually giving him a great opportunity. Even though Bai Xiaoli's temper is a little bad and we demon kings don't like her, I know that she will never choose the wrong person. The remnant spirit demon king slowly opened his mouth and continued. If you wish to withstand the imprints of the 10 great demon kings, your current strength is far from enough, even if you have comprehended the formation. At this time, Lin Yu was immersed in refining the spiritual energy. He felt that his entire consciousness was greedily absorbing this power. It was not until a few years later that Lin Yu woke up. The power of his soul consciousness flashed in his eyes. Thank you. Lin Yu cupped his hands slightly to the remnant spirit demon king. The remnant spirit demon king's imprint also entered Lin Yu's sea of consciousness and appeared in the empty space. The mysterious demon king's Tao law power began to permeate Lin Yu's body. His cultivation realm didn't rise, but his strength did. He could absorb the imprints of the 6 great demon kings. After being baptized by the Tao law, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call Lin Yu the #1 divine king of all time. No living creature could reach this step in the divine king realm. A divine king being able to clash head-on with an ancestor realm without being defeated. Only Lin Yu could do it now. After bidding farewell to the remnant spirit demon king, Lin Yu came to the Gaotian's sacred ground. The living creatures here had all taken human form and lived in human form. Moreover, there were 2 ancestor realm experts in their forces. However, they were in a very strange state. They were faintly discernible, and their auras were erratic. They seemed to be in a deep slumber. If these 2 ancestor realm experts entered the burial ground, the 10-square world would be in a very difficult situation. It was unknown whether they could obtain the mysterious factor in the end. Fortunately, the Gaotian sacred ground's attitude towards Lin Yu was very friendly. Lin Yu didn't understand it. He didn't have any contact with the Gaotian sacred ground before. He came to the altar. The Gaotian demon king's voice sounded. He said slowly, "My juniors brought your aura to the burial ground. Now, I only have one question for you. Where are you from?" "I'm the divine king of the 12 universes. However, I'm from Earth." Lin Yu answered. "Indeed, it's the aura of Earth." The Gaotian demon king was enlightened. After getting an answer, the Gaotian demon king handed his imprint to Lin Yu. Then, he said slowly, "There are many secrets on Earth. If you have the chance, you can go back and explore it yourself." "Earth? Are you from Earth too?" Lin Yu asked curiously. "Not really. It's just that I have a great connection with Earth." The Gaotian demon king answered. His attitude towards Lin Yu was very friendly, and he answered Lin Yu's questions carefully. "Earth isn't the first universe. If I have a chance, I'll go back." Lin Yu nodded. After all, he still had some ties on Earth. Although it might be different when he went back, it was a memory that was buried deep in his mind. He had to go back and take a look at it to resolve the past. This is the path you've chosen. Since you've come this far, I hope you won't regret it. The Gaotian demon king said slowly. He was referring to Lin Yu absorbing the imprint of the 10 great monster kings and stepping into the flawless ancestor realm. What does the imprint of the 10 great monster kings represent? Lin Yu continued to ask. You'll have to pay a price for what you get. Each of the 10 great monster kings has a huge karma. In the end, you'll have to bear it alone. The Gaotian demon king did not elaborate. At this point, Lin Yu understood. I have a lot of karma on me. Even if all kinds of karma are added to my body, I'm not afraid. Lin Yu answered calmly. He knew how terrifying the 10 great monster kings were. Since he got the imprint of the 10 great monster kings, it meant that he had to bear the corresponding price. This was not only because of his promise to the Demon King, but also because of some secret in the world. I hope you can reach the step I've imagined. The Gaotian Demon King said calmly. We'll meet again after 10,000 years. After saying that, The Gauchian Demon King fell into a deep sleep. Lin Yu walked out of the Gauchian's sacred ground with thoughts in his mind. Below the altar, a faint sigh could be heard. Human of Earth, I hope you won't disappoint me. Lin Yu walked on the land of the Gauchian sacred ground. Now, there were only 3 sacred grounds left that had a grudge with by Shaoli. Their forces were completely wiped out in the burial of heaven. This was a painful blow. It meant that the forces that they had painstakingly accumulated over the years were all burned to ashes. The remaining forces would need endless time to recuperate. This undoubtedly affected their plans. And the initiator of all of this was Lin Yu. He did not know what kind of obstacles he would face when he went to the remaining 3 sacred grounds. Lin Yu settled down at the edge of the Gauchian sacred ground and condensed his essence, energy, and spirit to the extreme. He had to be prepared to fight with the 10 great monster kings. Even though they were sealed and suppressed, even a drop of aura that leaked out could consign Lin Yu to eternal damnation. Lin Yu had to be very careful. As the passage opened, Lin Yu stepped onto the path to the turbid immortal's sacred ground. Chapter 1178. There was not a single source of light in the dim world. Everything was devoured. There were potholes on the ground, and there was a turbid water source that could infect one's body and divine sense. Lin Yu spent 2 months to arrive at a huge underground passage. Black astral winds continued to sweep over the area. Even with Lin Yu's current cultivation realm and physical body, he felt a burst of pain, and his skin seemed to be about to be cut open. This was because the 2 saint masters of the turbid immortal's sacred ground and the strongest among them had been killed in the burial ground by the 10 Square World. Even if there were living beings who survived and were hostile to Lin Yu, they did not stop him. Lin Yu easily reached the deepest part. An altar was soaked in a black water source. It was deep and breathtaking. You are very bold. You dare to come here personally. The voice of the turbid immortal demon king sounded. It's normal for there to be casualties. Why wouldn't I dare to come? Lin Yu faced the pressure of the turbid immortal demon king and remained unmoved. He stood upright like a pine tree. But you killed all the experts of the turbid immortal's sacred ground. The voice turned into substance and attacked Lin Yu. Lin Yu staggered a few steps back, but he did not suffer any substantial damage. Now that the turbid immortal demon king was sealed, he could not even exert half of his strength. It was difficult for him to cause any substantial damage to Lin Yu. Lin Yu was only worried about whether the turbid immortal demon king still had other tricks up his sleeve. I promise that if you hand over the demon king's mark to me, I can take you out of here after 10,000 years. Lin Yu came to the front of the altar. His voice was calm and his tone was very calm. 10,000 years is just a blink of an eye for a cultivator. Do you think you can break through to the ancestor realm and attain the great Tao? The turbid immortal demon king sneered. His tone was filled with killing intent. Lin Yu had already committed a heinous crime by killing most of the experts of the turbid immortal sacred ground. Lin Yu used the power of the God King's order. Just by relying on this artifact, turbid immortal demon king was disdainful. Mysterious artifacts could change owners, but one's cultivation could only depend on oneself. If you only have an artifact, even if I can't kill you now, you won't be able to escape this calamity after I break free for a long time. Lin Yu did not reply to the turbid immortal demon king's words. The God King's order's power of time was spreading out from it. An illusory figure gradually appeared in the void. It was Lin Yu. This seemed to be a reflection of the future. Lin Yu sat cross-legged at the end of the world. As the images moved forward, the power on his body grew stronger and stronger. His ancestor state cultivation base was undoubtedly revealed. However, it did not stop there. Under the power of the God King's seal, the images continued to evolve. In the end, under the astonished voice of the turbid immortal demon king, Lin Yu's aura on the illusory figure gradually grew stronger. In the end, he directly broke through the ancestor realm and reached the realm after the ancestor realm. Endless power of the universe gathered towards Lin Yu's body. At this moment, his figure gradually became illusory. In the end, the illusory figure shattered. The God King's order also stopped evolving the images. It seemed that with Lin Yu's current strength, it was difficult to continue deducing. The heavenly secrets were deceived. The heavenly tribulation began to gather in the sky above the turbid immortal sacred ground. For Lin Yu revealing the heavenly secrets, the heavenly Tao would send down a terrifying punishment to wipe out Lin Yu. At this moment, ancient runes lit up on the altar that sealed the turbid immortal demon king, directly dissipating the heavenly tribulation in the sky. The turbid immortal demon king fell into a short silence. "I can trust you this time." The turbid immortal demon king made a choice in his heart. In general, these experts of the turbid immortal sacred ground were created based on his aura. Their goal was to help him escape. As long as he could really escape, it didn't matter if he sacrificed some things. In the face of benefits, there were no eternal enemies. Thinking of this, the turbid immortal demon king handed over his imprint to Lin Yu. "You won't be disappointed," Lin Yu said indifferently and walked out of the turbid immortal sacred ground. Even the remaining living beings of the turbid immortal sacred ground were extremely hostile towards Lin Yu. But when they saw him walk out, they did not dare to stop him in the slightest. After Lin Yu left the underground palace of the turbid immortal sacred ground, he arrived at the edge of the underground palace. Only then did he begin to refine the turbid immortal demon king's imprint. In the later stage, just as the remnant spirit demon king had said, it became increasingly difficult for him to absorb the demon king's imprint. The rejection was not something that the array formation he had constructed could resolve. Fortunately, the power of Lin Yu's spiritual force had become stronger again after the remnant spirit demon king's creation. Therefore, although it was very difficult, there was not much danger. The entire refining process was daunting but not dangerous. At this moment, Lin Yu's body had become brighter and brighter, as if it had become the carrier of the Tao. His entire body had returned to its original state. He opened the path to the ancient pot sacred ground with the key. As he took a step forward, after an unknown period of time, he appeared in a desolate land. This land had two realms, white at the top and black at the bottom, containing yin and yang. The overall shape was like an immortal pot, carrying the broken Great Tao. The Great Tao rules here had been shattered by someone because of the Great Battle. Only bits of the broken Great Tao were left, which could be sensed by others. Lin Yu looked at the bottom of the ancient pot sacred ground. Surrounded by the broken Great Tao, there was an ancient altar. This was the place where the ancient pot demon king was sealed. After sensing Lin Yu's aura, the ancient pot demon king did not question him. He remained silent and did not say much. Instead, he handed the imprint to Lin Yu. "I hope you can quickly become stronger and fight with me at the same level." After Lin Yu left, the ancient pot demon king spoke slowly. "Anytime," Lin Yu replied. "It would be a long time before they could fight at the same level." However, Lin Yu had the belief that he was invincible. Even if it was the demon king who was invincible in the past, he would not fear him in a battle at the same level. Lin Yu spent more than 200 years refining the ancient pot demon king's imprint. Now, only the nether demon king's imprint was left. Lin Yu slowly opened his eyes. However, he vaguely had a bad premonition in his heart. It was a mysterious feeling. He looked into the unknown. At this time, the 12 universes had already undergone changes. Above the shattered sky, a huge crack appeared. The realm wall was broken, and endless chaotic lightning began to descend. Through the crack in the realm wall, a majestic figure could be vaguely seen attacking the 12 universes. It was him. He was using a powerful technique to break the realm wall and descend with his true body. The invasion of the 10th universe is about to begin. At this time, the great solar boundless Buddha had a worried look in his eyes. At this rate, the realm wall will be completely broken in less than 500 years. Sky Phoenix also appeared in the broken sky. The godly king has yet to return. I don't know if we can resist when the time comes. Archaeosaurus and the others had worried looks in their eyes. Sky Phoenix and the great solar boundless Buddha had already broken through to the godly king realm. However, the two godly kings could not have any substantial effect in the face of the 10th universe. Moreover, the great solar boundless Buddha and Sky Phoenix had just broken through and were still very weak. Just as they were worried, the godly king of the 10th universe had used a powerful technique to send a portion of his forces down. Countless battleships appeared in the heaven domain. The aura of Sky Phoenix and the others erupted. The war that affected the entire 12 universes had begun. Archaeosaurus, Sea God Dragon, Dark Priest, and the others had all awakened from their seclusion. Looking at the endless battleships in the sky, they did not hesitate and charged forward. In the past few hundred years, the Heavenly Alliance had developed rapidly and could face the 10th universe, which had a deep foundation. Even the vanguard troops seemed a little weak. In the end, the 12 universes had been accumulating for too long. As a result, their strength was not enough. Kill! Battle cries shook the sky. This war was destined to be fought with blood and bones. Chapter 1179. However, Lin Yu was unaware of all this. He was only slightly worried because he was now a divine king of the 12 universes. Hence, he could sense it. Lin Yu calmed himself down. There was still the Nether's sacred ground left. As long as he could obtain Lord Nether's mark, then he could consider breaking through to the ancestor realm. Lin Yu was walking in the Nether's sacred ground. Chilly winds howled. At this moment, it was like hell. There was no sign of life. There was an endless swamp in front of him. There were mountains of corpses and seas of blood. There was a huge bronze palace behind the altar made of black tree branches. This was the place where Lord Nether was sealed. There were 4 people guarding the 4 sides of the altar. Their auras were very powerful. They all seemed to be ancestor realm experts. Unexpectedly, even the 2 holy masters of the dark underworld Holy Land had been killed in the heaven burial ground. Unexpectedly, there were still experts of such caliber here. However, Lin Yu soon understood. The 4 of them were only able to stand at this level because of Lord Nether's power. If they were in the outside world, they would only be divine kings. Lord Nether, I'm afraid the 4 of them won't be able to keep me here, Lin Yu said slowly. The 4 beings had already locked on a Lin Yu with terrifying killing intent. At this moment, Lord Nether sighed and said, "All of you leave." Lord Nether also sensed the terrifying aura fluctuations coming from Lin Yu's body. Furthermore, he already knew that Lin Yu had already obtained the imprints of the 9 demon kings. His current strength had already reached an unimaginable level, even if Lin Yu was only at the Overgod realm now. However, Lord Nether knew, Lin Yu's strength could no longer be measured by his realm. "It won't be that easy to obtain my mark," Lord Nether said. "Fight with me at the same realm." At this time, the altar that sealed Nether began to emit a dim light. It was incomparably breathtaking, making it hard for people to open their eyes. Lin Yu's clothes fluttered in the wind as he said indifferently, "I'll satisfy you." From Nether Demon King's tone, he could hear the dignity and pride of a demon king. Lin Yu used the power of the God King's decree to draw out Nether's aura. A terrifying aura gradually appeared in front of the altar. The illusory figure of Lord Nether gradually appeared within the black mist. The bull's horn was huge, and it was filled with the power of space. It was as if even the void had fallen into silence the moment he appeared. Moreover, the presence that Nether gave off from the altar was only an overgod. However, even Lin Yu's expression couldn't help but turn serious, because the pressure that Lord Nether gave him was truly too great. He had surpassed all the opponents he had encountered before. Every realm of the 10 great monster kings was perfect. He was definitely a flawless overgod as well. He enjoyed this kind of battle very much. The 2 of them clashed once again. The 2 fists collided with a thunderous boom. The palace below was shaking, as if it could no longer withstand the remaining power from the sky. The 4 half-step progenitor realm elders of the Nether sacred land below were secretly speechless. They watched as Lin Yu and their patriarch fought back and forth, appearing to be evenly matched. Such a long time meant that Lin Yu's current strength was comparable to the Demon King's when he was young. This kind of talent and strength was too terrifying. It was simply standing in the category of taboo. Then, two colors of blood splashed down from the sky. Lin Yu and Lord Nether Demon King were injured at the same time. The two of them exchanged blows, each retreating a few hundred meters and standing in the sky. The 10 Demon Kings represented the top battle strength in the world. Even if they suppressed their cultivation, their accumulation and tempering of their cultivation were too condensed. The strength that Lin Yu displayed at this time was actually not inferior to his. Even Lord Nether revealed a look of surprise. "It seems that Bai Shaoli chose you for no reason," Lord Nether Demon King said. Lin Yu did not reply. He wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth and charged towards Lord Nether Demon King. The battle lasted for more than 10 days. In the end, they were all exhausted. At this moment, Lin Yu was panting heavily, as if a bottleneck in his body had been broken. It was as if a spring had formed in his body, revealing his dry flesh. Lin Yu's battle strength skyrocketed once again. This state was extremely mysterious. He seemed to be in an undefeatable position, undefeatable domain. Lord Nether Demon King half knelt on the ground, his expression changing drastically. Lin Yu was currently standing in the taboo. The undefeatable domain represented breaking the shackles and shackles of a realm, surpassing it, and taking a step towards the unknown. This state was between the overgod and half-step progenitor realm. It was another path hidden in the realm. Since ancient times, there were very few people who could grasp this state. Even among the 10 Demon Kings, no one had attempted to reach the undefeatable domain. "I've lost." Lord Nether Demon King sighed faintly. He knew that the current Lin Yu was already an undefeatable existence. He was exhausted and had no strength to resist. To think that I would be defeated in the future after roaming the world, Lord Nether Demon King said bitterly. However, this battle made him feel very satisfied and delighted. Lin Yu was also very respectful towards him. Although it was a battle of the same realm, Lin Yu did not use any tricks. They both used the true techniques they had grasped. Chapter 1180. In the end, Nether Demon King handed over the Demon King imprint. "If I really manage to break free one day, I look forward to fighting you again." Nether Demon King's figure slowly dissipated. Lin Yu nodded. Now, there were already 2 Demon Kings who wanted to challenge him. However, Lin Yu did not show the slightest bit of worry. 10,000 years was still a long way to go for him. Finally, he left the Nether Demon's sacred land and came to a chaotic land. Stars lingered in the sky, and a primitive aura leaked out. At this moment, the imprints of the 10 Demon Kings appeared beside Lin Yu. He wanted to truly step into the unblemished ancestor state here. It had been nearly 700 years since he left the 12 universes. He did not know if there were any changes in the 12 universes now. Or perhaps the 10th universe had already begun its invasion. Time was of the essence. Lin Yu sat cross-legged in the chaotic land and slowly closed his eyes. The environment here was ancient and still, as if time and space had frozen. The imprints of the 10 Demon Kings circled around him, bobbing up and down with an immortal aura. At this moment, the Tao that Lin Yu comprehended, which was originally illusory, was actually slowly materializing. It was like threads that linked the imprints of the 10 Demon Kings together. Gradually, his Tao law turned into a huge copper cauldron that contained the imprints of the 10 Demon Kings and began to officially refine them. A mysterious aura swept out. Lin Yu's figure seemed to have ascended. In the blink of an eye, 300 years had passed. Lin Yu's aura had been stagnant at the overgod state, and he had not broken through for a long time. The imprints of the 10 Demon Kings were slowly fusing together in the 12 universes. After the great battle with the 6-winged Divine King, they were once again engulfed in the flames of war. At this moment, Heavenly Phoenix and the others were already covered in blood as they fought in the dilapidated sky region. They were facing an endless number of warships. There were also 5 God King experts in front of them. Those who offend the 12 universes will be killed without mercy. Heavenly Phoenix let out a high-pitched cry. His body was bathed in flames as he charged toward the divine King Realm experts. The Vairocana Buddha was also chanting Buddha's name at this moment. However, their injuries were extremely serious. After all, they had just broken through to the divine King Realm not long ago. Their cultivation bases had not stabilized yet. At this moment, facing so many enemies, they were gradually showing signs of not being able to hold on. Are the godly kings of your universe afraid? I don't know where they are hiding now. In Universe 10, someone sneered with disdain. When the godly king returns, he will lead us into the 10th universe and make you all bow your heads. The Archaeosaurs who appeared in the crowd cursed. They were fighting with all their might. However, with the current strength of the 12 universes, even the vanguard of the 10th universe was no match for them. The 100 years of war had already caused them to suffer heavy losses. In fact, some of his old friends had already died on the battlefield. Not even their corpses remained. Our godly king is about to break through the realm wall. If you kneel and greet him, perhaps we can consider sparing your lives. The godly king of Universe 10 mocked. Although the Archaeosaurs was besieged at this moment, he was never one to be bullied. At this moment, he shouted from the side. Sky Phoenix slapped that old bastard's mouth. At this moment, Sky Phoenix was facing two godly king experts alone. He could barely take care of himself. Hearing the Archaeosaur's words, he nodded slightly. Not only his mouth, but also his body and soul. Sky Phoenix displayed the 5-color divine fire. Ignoring the other person's attack, he directly locked onto the godly king of Universe 10 who had spoken sarcastically. Die! Sky Phoenix only spat out one word. Standing in the 5-color divine fire, Sky Phoenix was temporarily immune to all attacks. He ignored the other person who was attacking his back. The 5-color divine fire pressed down on the godly king who had spoken sarcastically. Chi! Even the space was burned to the point of collapse. The godly king's expression changed. He immediately used a powerful technique to resist. Because they had all crossed realms to come here, they were severely restricted. It was difficult for them to display their strength. Otherwise, after 100 years, the 12 universes might have fallen. The face of the godly king who had spoken sarcastically was burned black by Sky Phoenix's 5-color divine fire. More than half of his beard and hair had fallen off. This caused his expression to become very unsightly. However, because Sky Phoenix had locked onto him, he was also struck down by the other person. He coughed out blood and gradually showed signs of being unable to hold on. Obviously, he had suffered extremely serious injuries. Just as the two godly kings of Universe 10 were about to kill Sky Phoenix completely, the 9 Heavens Tribulation song resounded throughout the entire heaven region. The Jade Pure Goddess attacked with her guqin. At this moment, the aura of a godly king had gradually appeared on her body. She was just drifting. She was just forcefully increasing her aura to block the two godly king experts and buy time for Sky Phoenix. This person is not bad. She can be my cauldron. The godly king who was blocked was not injured at all. On the contrary, his eyes revealed a lustful look. You dare to have crooked thoughts about the wife of godly King Linyu? Unforgivable. Sky Phoenix was furious and forcefully increased his aura. Once again, he charged into the sky, a candle in the wind. Are you still delusional enough to resist the conquest of Universe 10? The godly king spoke again. Sky Phoenix still locked onto that person immediately. As for the Jade Pure Goddess, she activated the 9 Heavens Tribulation song to block one person, to buy time for Sky Phoenix. On the other hand, the Great Solar Boundless Buddha was already exhausted because he had blocked the 3 godly king experts. In the end, he did not hesitate to use the backup plan left behind by Linyu. He saw that he had merged with Linyu's power and had truly entered the flawless godly king realm. The Tao laws of the entire 12 universes seemed to have submitted to him. The Great Solar Boundless Buddha changed from being merciful and compassionate. At this moment, his aura became incomparably domineering. Slaughter all the ants below. The godly king expert of Universe 10 gave the order. Endless warships pressed down on the Archaeosaurs and the others. There was no lack of Saint Realm experts among them, thinking that the entire 12 universes had fallen into a hopeless situation. Godly King Lin, you will return. We will resist for a period of time. When the time comes, the godly king will lead us to crush all enemies. The dark priest shouted. In the end, in order to preserve the strength of the 12 universes, they began to retreat to the primitive continent with the help of the power left behind by Lin Yu. However, the godly king of Universe 10 was getting closer and closer to breaking through the realm wall. No one had time to wipe the blood off their bodies. Their eyes were filled with hope. The wish of all living beings gathered in one place at this moment. And Lin Yu, who was in the chaos, seemed to have sensed it too. A crisis has appeared in the 12 universes. Lin Yu's eyes suddenly opened. At this moment, the entire land of chaos was shaking. The imprints of the 10 great monster kings were all melted at this moment. The 10 great imprints all merged into one and merged into Lin Yu's body. Boom! Heaven and earth roared. Lin Yu's aura became incomparably deep. The aura of an overgod began to grow infinitely. He crossed the half-step progenitor realm in one fell swoop and entered the progenitor realm. After sitting in the chaos for 350 years, Lin Yu had finally broken through. Chapter 1181. Lin Yu took a step forward. A passageway appeared in the chaos. Lin Yu disappeared on the spot. With the help of falsified heaven, he returned to the 12 universes in the blink of an eye. The Tao laws of the 12 universes began to resonate because of Lin Yu's return. Lin Yu's body was surrounded by a heart-palpitating aura. The Tao laws of the ancestor realm carried a supreme feeling. At this time, the godly king of the 10th universe had completely blasted open the boundary wall of the 12 universes. The terrifying aura caused the space of the entire heaven domain to crack inch by inch as if it was going to annihilate everything. Just because of the appearance of the 10th universe's godly king, the great sun boundless Buddha and heavenly phoenix were already coughing out large mouthfuls of blood and retreating. Their bodies were cracking apart. Is there no chance left? The great sun boundless Buddha's aura dimmed. He looked at the powerful figure above him, and at this moment, he was already in despair. Godly King Lin Yu, where are you now? Everyone was calling. Everyone knelt on the ground. Lin Yu is their only hope. Under the aura of the 10th universe's godly king, the gradually repairing realm C also began to shatter inch by inch. In the end, even the primitive continent was affected. The Heavenly Alliance's city was also shaking. Godly King Lin Yu. The Jade Pure Goddess's aura became very weak at this time. In the battle against the 10th universe's vanguard a few hundred years ago, in order to stall the godly King Realm powerhouse, she had already suffered an injury that involved her origin. At this time, her beautiful face was very pale. The 10th universe's godly king's true body had completely descended. Everyone was in despair. I'm here. I've always been here. A majestic voice sounded between heaven and earth. No one knew when. In front of everyone, a slender and tall figure appeared. Dressed in white, his black hair danced in the wind. Lin Yu, godly King Lin. The godly king has returned. Everyone sensed Lin Yu's aura. At this time, the dark priest and the others were excited. The Jade Pure Goddess stood in the void and looked at Lin Yu from afar without saying a word. Because only Lin Yu could appear, to her, that was enough. Lin Yu faced the godly king of Universe 10. His expression was calm and indifferent as he said, "You shouldn't have appeared here again." Lin Yu said lightly, "I didn't expect you to appear. I thought you were already scared and didn't know where you were hiding." The godly king of Universe 10 had a disdainful look on his face. He was merely at the ancestor stage. What he did not know was that Lin Yu had already broken through to the flawless ancestor stage in less than 1,000 years. One had to know that when the 10th Cosmos God King met Lin Yu, he had just broken through to the God King realm. In his eyes, they were as weak as ants. To be able to break through to the ancestor realm in just 1,000 years, in ancient history, there had never been such a talented person. Therefore, even though Lin Yu's body was exuding a faintly discernible aura that was hidden and powerful, the godly king of Universe 10 still did not care. At this time, he even mocked, "Obediently hand over the 12 universes, and perhaps I can exile you and prolong your feeble existence." The godly king of Universe 10 was not a human. His body was very huge, like a galaxy. Lin Yu stood under the sky, indescribably small. However, Lin Yu only said lightly at this time, "It's just the ancestor realm. It's not like I haven't killed one before." Lin Yu had killed 2 ancestor realm powerhouses in the burial of heaven 500 years ago. Now, facing the godly king of Universe 10, his aura was stronger than Gu Hu and old Holy Master Yu Ming. However, how could Lin Yu be compared to 500 years ago? The current him, after refining the imprint of the 10 great demon kings, had already broken through to the flawless ancestor realm. In all aspects, he was perfect. At this moment, the aura on Lin Yu's body erupted. It stabilized the entire 3 realms and 5 regions. It prevented them from shattering because of the aura of the ancestor realm. The godly king of Universe 10 finally discovered that the aura on Lin Yu's body was not weak, but because it was too transcendent, he could not see through it. "You have broken through to the ancestor realm." This was simply inconceivable. From the godly king realm to the ancestor realm in 1,000 years, this kind of cultivation speed, even if one searched through ancient history, had never appeared in the past. To the godly king of Universe 10, Lin Yu was a freak. He was the biggest variable in his conquest of the 12 universes since his reign. At this moment, the godly king of Universe 10, who was even larger than the heavenly domain, gradually showed a change in his eyes. He raised his hand and wiped it. The vanguard troops that invaded the 12 universes were all turned into powder. To the creatures of the 12 universes, the invincible existences, now, with just a wave of Lin Yu's hand, they all dissipated. All the threats and enemies, in the hands of Lin Yu, became so powerless. They were like candles in the wind, extinguished in the wind, without the slightest suspense. An incomparably rich source of extreme evil spread out. Even if you have broken through to the ancestor realm, do you think you can control everything? The godly king of Universe 10, although shocked at this moment, did not panic, because in his eyes, the failure of the 12 universes was already a foregone conclusion, only to see that in the endless source of extreme evil. Suddenly, a terrifying aura appeared again. It was like a ferocious dragon, roaring without the slightest emotion. Following the appearance of one, a second, a third began to appear one after another. These were the previous godly kings of Universe 10. Before they died, they threw themselves into a supreme formation and turned into a formation spirit. On the way to conquer other universes, they revealed a terrifying aura. There were a total of 9 of them, all of them incomparably powerful. I'll let you know how far the 10th universe has developed until now. You alone can't stop the conquest of the 10th universe. The godly king of Universe 10 slowly opened his mouth at this moment. He was incomparably confident in the supreme formation of the 10th universe. This was the strongest person in the entire history of their 10th universe. After the fall of the first godly king, they began to use the source of extreme evil as the foundation of their cultivation. After development, the density of the source of extreme evil in the 10th universe had already exceeded their imagination. They needed more space to cultivate the source of extreme evil. As for the 12 universes, in addition to being weak, another huge reason was that there was an extremely rich source of extreme evil here. This might be able to make the strength of the 10th universe rise to another level as a whole. Embark on the path to rule the 12 universes. This was a grand ambition, and also the great wish of the previous godly kings of the 10th universe. They were all committed to this matter. By now, they were already infinitely close to their goal. Lin Yu watched this scene calmly. Dealing with so many progenitors, Lin Yu was indeed a little troublesome. However, he wasn't alone. In the space beside him, a chubby little boy suddenly appeared. I was suffocated to death. Boss, you finally let me out. You go kill that big guy. I'll go break the formation. Lin Yu said to Lin Jianyu. This big guy is so black, so disgusting. Lin Jianyu frowned and asked, Boss, is this the world you live in? How could it be destroyed like this by them? Unforgivable. His whole body exuded a bloody aura as he charged straight into the sky. Chapter 1182. The Battle Strength of the Progenitor Realm. Everyone was shocked. To them, a brat who hadn't even grown hair actually had the battle strength of the Progenitor Realm. How shocking was this? At this time, Lin Yu looked at the formation formed by the sacrifices of the previous godly kings of the 10th universe. He was not afraid and was calm. Then, he took a step forward and the world changed again. Now that he was in the 12 universes and was surrounded by the great Tao, his battle strength had once again increased by a level. Now, even if he was facing the 7 godly kings of the 10th universe, he had full confidence that he could easily break the formation formed by their lifetime cultivation. He's just a deceased god king. Even if he's one of the 7 progenitors, he's still a piece of paper in front of me, Lin Yu said slowly. The Emperor's sword in his hand carried a terrifying Tao law as he directly took a step forward. He faced the boundless source of extreme evil without showing the slightest fear. The aura on his body shocked everyone. The strength of the progenitor realm. No, the previous godly kings in the formation still had some of their own consciousness. At this time, they had a premonition that the aura on Lin Yu's body seemed to be wrong. It seemed to be far stronger than their realm. Even though Lin Yu's body was still showing signs of having just broken through to the progenitor realm, there were still signs of instability. I understand. He is the flawless progenitor realm. One of the godly king's souls said at this time, guessing something. Lin Yu did not answer. A sword was swung out with endless power. This sword almost directly buried the 7 immortal souls. Although they had used their most powerful means to resist the sword light, they were still unable to do so. But they were still forced to retreat and leave the boundary wall of the 12 universes. Lin Yu took a step forward. He chased and came to the chaotic zone outside the universe. There was no replenishment of energy and matter here, and the consumption of battle was very intense. It was difficult to maintain for a long time. But Lin Yu was not prepared to fight for a long time. He raised his hand and unleashed a terrifying killing move. The phantom of Azura of the Great Void 8 tribes appear behind him. The mysterious aura was between evil and good. The power in his body was enough to tear apart the primal chaos. Even the sky formed by the origin of abomination was scattered by Azura's arms. Lin Yu was facing 7 godly kings of the 10th universe, all of whom had progenitor realm cultivation bases. The Emperor's sword in his hand slashed down. It cleaved the canopy formed by the origin of utmost vile in half. Lin Yu was using the origin substance to stabilize his cultivation base in the heaven burial. Now that he had encountered the abominable origin, the two were like fire and water. Their initial clash was like endless boiling water, steaming in the primal chaos. The essence chi that had turned into origin chi had completely disappeared. Lin Yu broke free from their shackles and executed the 3 moves of the ancient god. His terrifying physical strength had materialized into a layer of hazy light that enveloped his body, giving him a feeling of impenetrability. He was surrounded by the abominable origin, but he couldn't harm it at all. In one strike, then he killed one of the souls. Although he managed to reassemble it with great difficulty, his origin was still damaged, and it was difficult to recover. He must have obtained some unimaginable opportunity. Otherwise, it's impossible for him to reach such a terrifying level in such a short time. At this time, The godly kings of the past and the formation looked frightened. At this time, Lin Yu was fighting against the entire 10th universe by himself. All the living beings of the 12 universes under the protection of Lin Yu's aura were shocked. Godly King Lin Yu's power is enough to overturn the entire universe. The great sun, boundless Buddha sighed. As expected, the old godly king made the right choice. Sky Phoenix's long and narrow eyes were also watching the battle in the primal chaos. In the face of such a high-level battle, they were no longer of any use and could only watch helplessly. Even so, their understanding of Lin Yu had become increasingly unfathomable, especially the great sun, boundless Buddha, whose face was filled with gratification. He had watched Lin Yu grow up step by step. Now that he had reached this step, he didn't disappoint the old godly king's wishes. Lin Yu would be the one who would lead the 12 universes to a higher stage. He would witness a more supreme world. Soon, Lin Yu's name would appear in the 12 universes. Our 12 universes have never been weak. After 2 generations of hard work, the 12 universes are now officially on par with the other universes. Lin Yu stood under the endless, abominable origin. His voice was vast and mighty, containing endless power that resounded throughout the universe and the depths of the primal chaos. Invaders shall be killed without mercy, Lin Yu said casually. It possessed endless power. The invaders of the 10th universe were terrified. The godly king of the 12 universes in front of them was too powerful and had a supreme demeanor. His white robe was so conspicuous in the darkness. The 12 universes have long been in the pocket of my 10th universe. Even if you have broken through to the flawless ancestor realm, you can't do anything alone. The godly king of the 10th universe in the abominable origin had a cold expression. They all knew that if they didn't kill Lin Yu now, it wouldn't take long. Even if they raised the power of the entire universe, it was very likely that they wouldn't be able to suppress him. We must not let him go. A godly king of the abominable origin slowly said. He used a method to envelop the entire 3 realms and 5 domains. All of the living beings within were imprisoned. He wouldn't allow them to escape. They wanted to make Lin Yu hesitate and keep everyone in the 12th universe here. Lin Yu could only fight to the death here today. He couldn't escape. You think too highly of yourselves. Lin Yu shook his head indifferently. The living beings of the 12 universes were protected by his aura. They could only imprison, but they couldn't really hurt him. He looked at the godly kings of the 10th universe in the abominable origin with indifference in his eyes. You can resist the might of the heavens by yourself. At this time, the godly kings of the 10th universe seemed to have merged with the Tao. They were immortal and indestructible, giving people a feeling of invincibility. Lin Yu slowly took a step forward. The abominable origin around him was exploding, turning into origin essence chi and disappearing into the chaos. The 3 moves of the ancient god manifested endless power. Lin Yu's blood and chi surged, covering the sky. Just the blood and chi he displayed could already form an equal force with the abominable origin. The chaos of the 12 universes was completely occupied by Lin Yu's blood and the abominable origin. Everything became unknown. Everyone's line of sight was blocked. The entire chaos was exploding. The original stars turned into dust and fell into the 12 universes. The unprecedented battle affected the structure of the 12 universes. One could hear the godly kings of the 10th universe roaring. They seemed to be under great pressure. Their bodies, which were even larger than the original stars, appeared. They broke free from the terrifying remaining power and charged toward Lin Yu. But all their means seemed to have lost all power in front of Lin Yu. They were easily neutralized. Chapter 1183. Lin Yu's chi and blood were burning like the flames between heaven and earth. It smelted the void. Facing the attacks of the previous godly kings of the 10th universe, Lin Yu's aura was still blazing, making people not dare to look directly at it. Everyone in the 12 universes held their breaths. although they could no longer see the scene. But from the battle between the godly kings of the 10th universe and Lin Jianyu, they could see how terrifying the strength of an ancestor realm was. The continents in the universe couldn't withstand this aura at all. Even if it was just a little bit of aura, it would cause endless mountains and rivers to shatter. If it weren't for the protection of Lin Yu's aura, the entire primitive continent would have been shattered like the heavenly domain. Lin Jianyu was also really angry. Ugly thing, eat this young master's fist. The blazing fist light illuminated the universe. Lin Jianyu's character had nothing to do with his harmless appearance. At this time, he was full of ruffian. He didn't have the temperament of an ancestor realm at all. At the same time, the godly king of the 10th universe was also shocked. He found that the child in front of him didn't have the cultivation of an ancestor realm, but his physical body was extremely powerful, far surpassing him, breaking all methods with one force. All divine abilities and spells were useless in front of Lin Jianyu. They were all shattered by the faint golden light outside his body. The sky seemed to have collapsed. The aura of chaos descended in the 12 universes, causing large-scale destruction. What bloodline do you have? The godly king of the 10th universe retreated again and again. At the same time, black blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. He was very shocked. The little child in front of him was getting braver and braver. Now, the godly king had a halo that could eliminate all divine abilities. Even the endless source of extreme evil on his body was fading at this time. It seemed that he couldn't withstand Lin Jianyu's chi and blood. At this time, he had been suppressed, and a sense of powerlessness inexplicably appeared in his heart. At this time, a godly king who was fighting with Lin Yu said in shock, "Ancient God, be careful." The era he lived in was very ancient. At this time, from the 3 moves of the ancient god used by Lin Jianyu and Lin Yu, he guessed something. He reminded the godly king of Universe 10. However, he had no time to care about anything else. He was being suppressed by Lin Yu and was forced to retreat. The extreme evil origin canopy that filled the sky was shattering like a broken umbrella. Lin Yu alone suppressed the previous god kings of Universe 10 to the point that they couldn't raise their heads. Even though they had used all their strength, they were still unable to do anything to Lin Yu. Lin Yu's strength was even more terrifying than Lin Jianyu's, who possessed the ancient god bloodline. Not only did he possess the 3 skills of the ancient god to strengthen his physical body, but his strength was also unparalleled. Only now did they realize how terrifying the flawless progenitor realm was. Even though Lin Yu had only just broken through, that surge of power still made everyone tremble in fear. In ancient history, there were not many flawless progenitors. Furthermore, Lin Yu had broken through with the help of the most powerful imprints of the 10 great demon kings since ancient times. His foundation was even more terrifying and difficult to describe. Lin Yu swept out with his sword. The sword light became no longer as blazing, but the power contained in it was endless. It seemed that no one could resist it. The previous god kings in the extreme evil origin were all cut into pieces at this time. They could only reorganize themselves with difficulty through the extreme evil origin. His strength is shocking. Finally, someone among the previous god kings spoke. This wasn't praise. On the contrary, the killing intent in their eyes became even more obvious. It's a pity that you haven't cultivated for a long time. If our Universe 10 had come a little later, perhaps you would have been invincible. But now, you won't be able to live. At this time, the previous god kings roared and began to devour each other. Lin Yu frowned and waved his sword. He wanted to stop this trend, but he found that it didn't have the slightest effect. He couldn't stop the previous god kings from fusing and devouring each other. I'll let you fuse. I'll give you time to make you completely despair, Lin Yu said casually. Then he stood in the deep, chaotic space. He quietly waited for their fusion to complete. No one knew how much time had passed. All the extreme evil origin began to converge, returning to the bodies of the previous god kings who had fused into one. At this time, the previous incomparably huge god kings began to slowly shrink. The void collapsed around their bodies, unable to withstand this aura. The previous god kings who had fused into one were already indescribable. Their faces were very ferocious, like evil spirits from the underworld. Their voices overlapped and were very strange. You will pay the price for your arrogance. The previous god kings laughed and spread throughout the entire 12 universes. This voice was incomparably powerful. Even the barrier that Lin Yu had set up to protect the living beings of the 12 universes was like a mirror at this time. Cracks appeared. Is this all of your strength? It's very disappointing. Lin Yu shook his head. He hadn't used all of his strength all this time. It wasn't until now that the aura all over his body was released. Not only was the barrier repaired at the first moment, his eyes became incomparably deep. He looked straight at the combination of the previous god kings who was only the size of an adult. In his tone, there was disappointment. I wanted to use you guys to test my realm, but I didn't expect to only have this little strength. Lin Yu took a step forward, and his aura became incomparably blazing. At this time, it was like a great sun that illuminated the entire 12 universes, bringing with it majesty and desolation. The Emperor's sword in Lin Yu's hand shone. At this time, the life form of the previous god kings who had fused into one shouted in disbelief. Impossible! You're only at the early stage of the progenitor realm. How can you be so powerful? He was in despair. Lin Yu's sword directly shattered the combined body of the previous god kings. It was just that he quickly reassembled, and his aura was not affected in the slightest. However, no matter how powerful you are, you can't kill me. The life form of the previous god kings spoke at this time. Now that they had fused into one, coupled with the endless extreme evil origin, they were already in the state of being immortal and indestructible. The birth of the extreme evil origin was extremely mysterious, and no one knew where it came from. After reaching the progenitor realm, with the help of the strange, indestructible attribute, it created the power of the 10th universe. Every time you resurrect, I will kill you once, until your unyielding will is shattered. Lin Yu spoke. He didn't have the slightest anxiety or worry. At this time, the combined life form of the previous god kings didn't pose much of a threat to him. Lin Yu suppressed it. The Emperor's sword in his hand, coupled with his own vitality, suppressed the life form. This place formed a cage. No matter how the strange life form attacked, it was difficult to break free. Lin Yu's endless power poured out, constantly obliterating its body. Although the strange life form wouldn't die, it would experience that kind of pain. A few days later, the strange life form had already begun to roar. Lin Yu imprisoned it in the chaos cage. Azura's illusory hands slightly closed, firmly locking it. Chapter 1184. At this time, the godly king of the 10th universe had already shown signs of decline. Repeatedly suppressed by Lin Jianyu, his hair was already disheveled, and he coughed up large mouthfuls of blood. His body had been beaten up many times. Boss, have you finished off the opponent? Lin Jianyu looked into the depths of the chaos and frowned slightly. No, I have to work harder. As he spoke, his aura became incomparably blazing, and he charged straight towards the godly king of the 10th universe. The godly king of the 10th universe finally revealed a look of horror at this time. As a living being, he was also afraid of death. And now, he had already felt this threat. Big brother, wait for me for a while. Lin Jianyu shouted into the chaos. Kid, don't be too confident. The godly king of the 10th universe, as the master of the universe, had a supreme status and ruled over countless living beings. At this time, he was actually looked down upon and chopped into meat on the chopping board. Although he was afraid, he still spoke. Sit down obediently. Lin Jianyu punched out. The godly king of the 10th universe revealed a look of shock. He was retreating, but as time passed, he was finally killed by Lin Jianyu, and the extreme evil origin that filled the sky dissipated at this time. Hiss! The dark priests and the others in the 12 universes couldn't help but gasp. This seemingly unremarkable little child possessed terrifying battle prowess. He had actually managed to kill an ancestor stage expert with his bare fists. This little kid, where did the godly king bring him? The great sun boundless Buddha was also a little stunned. This was too fierce. The veterans of the Heavenly Alliance were all excited. Lin Jianyu wiped his nose with his thumb and sniffed. Well done. He came to Lin Yu's side. Lin Yu nodded. Thank you for your praise, big brother, Lin Jianyu said with a smile. Lead them to deal with the remaining invaders, Lin Yu said. Lin Jianyu nodded. He came to the front of the living beings of the 12 universes and wiped away the protective barrier here. The counterattack of the 12 universes has officially begun. Everyone's expression was incomparably excited. They had been suppressed for too long. Many of the people around them had already passed away. Facing the invaders, they had endless hatred. She wished she could drink his blood and eat his flesh. Under Lin Jianyu's leadership, the remaining invaders were unable to do much. This was Lin Yu's way of tempering the living beings of the 12 universes. There would be a day when Lin Yu would no longer be around. It was impossible for him to protect all the living beings in the 12 universes forever. He wanted them to rise quickly in battle. Naturally, blood and bones were used to pave the way. Time passed. 10 years had passed. All the invaders in the 12 universes had been wiped out. The strange life forms that were constantly being destroyed by Lin Yu were on the verge of going crazy. The long period of torture had caused him to lose his rationality. At this time, his mind was no longer clear. Lin Yu's current strength was not enough to kill such a strange life form. In the end, Lin Yu set up many traps and sealed him, banishing him into the endless primal chaos so that he would never be able to find his way back. After the Great War, the 12 universes had many things to do. Greetings, godly king. Greetings, godly king. Lin Yu returned to Heaven City. He was dressed in white, and his aura became ordinary again. It was hard to imagine that such a young person had destroyed the highest combat strength of a universe. Lin Yu indicated for them to get up. Following that, he walked into the temple. He looked at the shrine in the square, which was emitting a hazy light. The true spirits of Lin Xiao and the others were almost condensed. In the end, Lin Yu used the power of the godly king order to completely revive them. Although the Realm Sea Lord and the others had a conflict with Lin Yu before, but in the battle with the six-winged Divine King, the Realm Sea forces had suffered heavy losses. The majority of the forces for the living beings of the 12 universes stepped forward one after another, and in the end, didn't hesitate to burn their origin. This was a great spirit, worthy of everyone's admiration, as the power of the godly king order spread throughout the entire square. After an unknown amount of time, in the white light in Ruahai, a few people slowly walked out. Lin Yu had a head of white hair. His expression was very indifferent, and he only nodded slightly at Lin Yu. Two similar figures were like mirrors, looking at each other. Lin Xiao had endured for a long time, and in the final battle, he injured the six-winged Divine King and bought some time for Lin Yu and the others. He had made great contributions to the 12 universes. At this moment, everyone, including the Realm Sea Lord and the others, received a deep bow from everyone. After so many years, he received everyone's wish power. Now that he was revived, the aura on his body was like an abyss, and his cultivation had improved greatly. The Realm Sea Lord had even stepped into the Saint Realm in one fell swoop. The entire Heavenly Alliance was peaceful and excited. In the main hall, Lin Yu stood on the high platform and bowed deeply to the statue of the old godly king in front of him. Then, he turned around and looked at everyone. Godly king, I think now is the time to step into the 10th universe and conquer it. The Dark Priest cupped his hands and said. Lin Yu nodded. Dark Priest, you go and prepare. Lin Yu handed over this power to the Dark Priest. Now, the invasion of the 10th universe was quelled. Lin Yu was not a kind person. Since the 10th universe chose to invade, now that they were defeated, they had to accept the fact that they were taken over. 3 years later, Lin Yu personally went to the 10th universe and took over all the resources in it. But Lin Yu did not exterminate and kill the innocent. He only wiped out the remaining forces of the 10th universe's godly king. After that, Lin Yu spent a period of time purifying the endless evil source in the 10th universe. After that, Lin Yu handed over the 10th universe to him. He was responsible for the development of the resources in it. The strength of the 10th universe was very strong, and naturally, the resources in it were also terrifying. In the next few decades, the strength of the creatures in the 12 universes had developed greatly. Lin Yu accompanied goddess Yu Qing and Qin Yi for a while. At this moment, he was sitting in the main hall, and his aura had become more and more restrained. In the 12 universes, a mysterious man in a Taoist robe walked over. Who is the godly king of the 12 universes? At this moment, the mysterious man asked directly, "What's the matter?" Lin Yu asked indifferently. "In 100 years, the 12 universes will hold a meeting. I am ordered to inform you." The Taoist looked at Lin Yu and was secretly surprised. The godly kings of the 12 universes didn't seem to be old, but the aura on their bodies made people instinctively tremble. Meeting. Lin Yu didn't know that there was a meeting between the 12 universes. It is held once every million years. The location of the meeting is in the first universe to discuss the balance and development between the universes. The Taoist looked at Lin Yu. They had already received the news that the 10th universe had been taken over. Previously, the 12 universes were weak and in a closed state. The universe meeting among them did not take them into consideration. But it was different now. One universe had been taken over by the 12 universes, and things happened very quickly, almost too late for the other universes to react. This meeting would probably target the 12 universes. I will go when the time comes. Lin Yu took the golden invitation from the Taoist's hand. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.